talk into it. Give me mic check. Mic check. Timba, mic check. Timba, swap that for the wireless. Swap that mic for the wireless.
Okay? Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to day 2 of the historic 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. Before we get started, I would like to ask if everybody who is in the back, if you could move forward. Let's find some seats to the front. All right. So my name is Aisha Fields, and I'm the International Director of the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project, which is one of the organizations that was established by the African People's Socialist Party and is a part of the Uhuru movement and has the responsibility of organizing African people around the world who have skills in agriculture and education and healthcare and in other development related areas to be able to contribute those skills to the African Revolution. And so I'm very honored today to serve as the MC for day 2 of our historic Congress. And before we jump in, I'd just like to go over a couple of housekeeping issues. First, be sure you get your packet and are properly checked in at registration. You're going to need to make sure you check in at registration because you have to have your food tickets for lunch. So please make sure that you properly checked in at registration. The bathrooms are in the back, through this hallway here to your left. Please turn off your phones or put them on silent. So please, let's take a moment to do that right now. Put them on silent or turn them off. Remember that no photographs or videos unless you have been given the permission from the party's Department of Agitation and Propaganda. So please, no photographs unless Agitprop has given prior approval. Lunch will be served in this room, so again, make sure to have your tickets in hand. And the only way you're going to get your tickets is if you properly check in at registration. So now, without further ado, I would like to bring forward the Secretary General of the African Socialist International and my comrade, Secretary General Loezi Kinshasa.
So today we're going to start with African Internationalist chants. Are you ready for the chants? Are you ready for the chants? Vanguard, Vanguard, we must be African people. Vanguard, we must lead. Vanguard, we must lead. It is your Right, that's great. Today is day 2, and we are in the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. I just want to reiterate the significance of this Congress. You know, nobody is going to transfer power to the African working class, right? We must capture power. So this Congress is part of the worldwide process for the African proletariat to capture power. You know, around the world, African masses, the African working class and poor persons are restless. There is class struggle, intense class struggle taking place everywhere around the world where the African nation is. As we said yesterday, what is missing is the African People's Socialist Party. But guess what? We are the process for the merge, for the meeting of the African People's Socialist Party and the spontaneous struggle of the African people is taking place. It's a slow speed, but it's happening. And this is the significance of this Congress, is the march towards the meeting of the struggle of black people everywhere with its highest form of leadership, which is the African People's Socialist Party represented in this Congress today. That's why we are confident in our victory. So, what we will say today, as you know, yesterday was a very historic day, and Masquerade Ball was a very, very successful. And it was powerful to hear from Chairman Amanichela for his political reports to the 7th Congress, and to see the economic development of the Congress and how it gives back to our donors and supporters. Today will be another historic, today will be another history meeting day. So I will take this opportunity to reconvene the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party for day 2. Vanguard, we must lead. African people must be free. Vanguard, we must lead. African people must be free.
Thank you, S.G. Loazy, for convening day 2. So now I'd like to bring up Yejide Oronila, who is the president of the African National Women's Organization. Yejide speaks and organizes on the ground as the director of the African National Women's Organization, a membership-based organization created by the African People's Socialist Party to address the special oppression of African women. Welcome, Comrade Yejide, to give us a tribute to African women.
Okay, so what I'll be doing is just going through a list of some African women that you do know and that you may not know, and just reading a little bit about them. And I'm just going to ask for your patience as we just read through verbatim what's on the slide. So hold on. You can go to the next slide. So first I want to salute the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. In particular, some of the groundbreaking women that serve on the African People's Socialist Party National Central Committee. We have Honorable Naya Shatella, Chair, Aisha Fields, Director of the All African People's Development Empowerment Project, Columbia and Danette, President of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, me, Akile NIE, Department of Education and Propaganda. And I know that we had an award yesterday, but I did want to give special recognition to Gaida Campbell of the African People's Socialist Party. And all of the women membership of the African People's Socialist Party who drive us every day, and the membership of the African National Women's Organization, Uhuru. So the first woman that we have is Dandara. Dandara was the wife of Brazil's greatest African freedom fighter named Zumbi, who in the 1600s led a serious struggle against slavery. Dandara was, however, a fierce and fearless warrior leading armies into battle against the Portuguese and Dutch for total liberation of Africans in Brazil. Dandara co-founded a community much like the Maroons of Jamaica and Americas, the United Kingdom, the Kingdom of the Palmares, where escaped slaves found safe haven. This self-sustaining community was not only protected by very dense vegetation, it was protected by well-thought-out strategies that involved Dandara. Palmares thrived for almost a century, and Dandara, known as a fighter, also had keen interest in agriculture and hunting. Kimpa Vida. Prior to the 17th century, Kingdom of Congo was the most powerful and wealthiest region in Central Africa, but things rapidly changed following the Portuguese military attack that saw Congo's King Antonio killed and the region spiraling into devastating political unrest. Civil wars and wars with the Portuguese as well, with the people taken into slavery. By the 18th century, Congo was a political and cultural void. It was during this period Kimpa Vida was born. Determined to re-establish a unified and political, cultural, and spiritual Kingdom of Congo, Kimpa Vida as a young woman fought against the colonialist imposed rule, slavery system, and religion, which included creating her own religious system based around Congo's history and geographical area known as Antonianism. Kimpa Vida quickly attracted a mass following of people who she led to rebuild and repopulate a region of the kingdom, much to the dismay of the colonialists. Njinga Mbandi, Queen Nzinga, was a 17th century queen of the Ndongo and Matamba kingdoms of the Mbundu people in Angola. Nzinga fought fearlessly and cleverly for the freedom and stature of her kingdoms against the Portuguese who were colonizing the area at the time. Today she is remembered in Angola for her political and diplomatic acumen, as well as her brilliant military tactics. A major street in Luanda is named after her, and in 2002 a statue of her in Kinaxisi was dedicated by the President Santos to celebrate the 27th anniversary of independence. Nzinga was defeated in 1625 and withdrew her forces to the east. The Portuguese set up Nzinga's sister Kifungi as a puppet ruler who acted as a loyal spy to Nzinga for many years. Nzinga was able to regroup and strengthen her base of power within the territory of Matamba in 1629. And during this time, Nzinga accepted refugees of the slave trade. During the 1630s, Nzinga was able to seize power in Matamba when the female chief of Muhongo, Mutamba, died. Solitude. Solitude was born in chattel slavery in 1800s in Guadeloupe and later freed under that first Abolition Act of 1794. 8 years later, Napoleon Bonaparte seeking to resurrect the sugar-based economy for France, restored chattel slavery in the French colonies, compelling Solitude to flee to the maroon settlement of La Goyeve, which later became under attack by the French. Now in command of a small group of escapees, Solitude led them to the hills of Guadeloupe, avoiding capture. A pregnant Solitude mobilized and joined the masses to join freedom fighters Louis Delgres against the French army. After many successful campaigns, Solitude was eventually captured by the French, imprisoned and hung only after she gave birth to her baby, which was the property of the plantation owner. Nanny of the Maroons. Nanny was a leader of the Jamaican Maroons at the beginning of the 18th century. She was known by both the Maroons and the British settlers as an outstanding military leader who became, in her lifetime and after, a symbol of unity and strength for her people during times of crisis. She was particularly important to them in the fierce fight with the British during the First Maroon War from 1720 to 1739. Although she has been immortalized in songs and legends, certain facts about Nanny, or Granny Nanny as she is affectionately known, have also been documented. Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was born into slavery in the 1820s and suffered extreme physical brutality from her slave master. She later successfully fled to the north to escape slavery. Such was her love for the people, she went back to take more Africans into the north despite the risk of capture. Over the course of 10 years, Harriet Tubman made over 19 trips to the slave states of the South and helped bring over 300 Africans to the so-called free states of the North. She died in 1913 at 93 years of age, and the Burning Spears newspaper's Harriet's Daughter's page is dedicated to the fighting. I don't know why I'm starting to cry. Is dedicated to the fighting African women who continue the legacy of Harriet Tubman, who was a fearless freedom fighter during the time of slavery in the U.S. Ya Santua. After the deportation of Prempeh I, the British Governor General of the Gold Coast, Frederick Hodgson, demanded the golden stool, the symbol of the Asante nation. This request led to a secret meeting of the remaining members of the Asante government at Kumasi to discuss how to secure the return of their king. Ya Santua was chosen by a number of regional Asante kings to be the war leader of the Asante Fati Boys. This is the first and only example for a woman to be given that role in Asante history. The Ashanti British War of the Golden Stool was led by Queen Mother Nana Ya Asantewa with an army of 5,000. Beginning in March 1900, the rebellion laid siege to the fort of Kumasi, where the British sought refuge. During the fighting, Queen Ya Asantewa and 15 of her closest advisors were captured, and they too were sent into exile to the Seychelles. The rebellion represented the final war in the Anglo-Asante series of wars that lasted throughout the 19th century. Ya Asantewa died in exile in the Seychelles on the 17th of October 1921. Amy Ashwood Garvey. Amy Ashwood, Marcus Garvey's first wife, was born in 1897 in Jamaica. She organized the women's section of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, was secretary of the New York branch, founded the Negro World newspaper, and a director of the Black Star Line steamship. She founded a domestic science institute in Jamaica during the Second Imperialist War. Amy Jacques Garvey, born in 1895 and died in 1973, Jamaica, was a poet, a journalist, Negro World editor, and organizer in the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and was in the leading role during Marcus Garvey's wrongful conviction. She was the second wife of Marcus Garvey, Marcus Garvey's incarnation. UNIA was the largest international anti-colonial black organization with 11 million members. Zawo Tako. There is a debate about whether Zawo Tako is a folklore or real. Nevertheless, her story of resistance and her murder is part of the Somali national pride. The story goes, humiliated by his co-bandits of World War II Italy around 1947 and 1948, for national pride and international prestige, wanted to maintain its colonial grip over Somalia. Italy did. Opposed to Italian colonial rule, Hawa Tako joined the Somali Youth League and courageously fought for a free and independent Somalia. Italians armed with weapons attacked the peaceful demonstration. They began at the SYL building, intent on burning it down. Mohammed Hirsi Noor, one of the founding members of SYL, was shot when he stood in the doorway to ask the men to leave. Hawa Tako went to his aid carrying a club, and she too was shot. Olive Morris. Olive Morris was born on the 26th of June, 1952 in Jamaica and moved to London at age 9. She established the Brixton Black Women's Collective. She was a founding member of the Organization of Women of African and Asian Descent, a broadly socialist umbrella organization, and was a member of the British Black Panther movement and helped found the Manchester Black Women's Cooperative and Manchester Black Women's Mutual Aid Group. She physically defended herself from police harassment, protected against virginity texting on South Asian women immigrants, campaigned for squatter rights, and traveled extensively supporting the struggles of African and other colonized people around the world. She died on the 12th of July, 1979, at the young age of 27 of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Her life is remembered for the impact she had on Black community struggles in Brixton and Manchester. Claudia Jones. Born Claudia Cumberbatch in Trinidad, 21st of February 1915, her family migrated to the U.S. when she was 9. She later became a political activist in the Communist Party USA and supported the Scottsboro Boys campaign. Following imprisonment due to her political activism, she was deported in 1955 and spent the rest of her life in the UK. In London, she was met with hostility from French communists and went on to campaign against race discrimination in housing, education, employment, immigration. No Irish, no colors, no dogs is what Africans were normally greeted with. She founded the West Indian Gazette, an anti-imperialist newspaper, and the Afro-Asian Caribbean News. She founded the Caribbean Carnival, which went on to become the Notting Hill Carnival, which is now the largest street event in Europe. Josina Mufemba Machel. Josina grew up in Mozambique in a family that was actively opposed to Portuguese colonial rule. In 1964, Josina, along with several others, left Mozambique for Tanzania to join the Mozambique Liberation Front. But this journey was intercepted by the brutal Portuguese state authorities who imprisoned her for 6 months and was only released following an international campaign by Frelimo. In mid-1968, Josina is named as a delegate to the Second Frelimo Congress, where she is a strong advocate for the full inclusion of women
within all aspects of the liberation struggle. She is then appointed head of the women's section of Frelimo, Departments of International Relations. In this position, she travels periodically to international meetings on women's rights and the role of women in development, where she uses example of Frelimo experiences to advocate for women's equal participation in all aspects of developmental process. She was also in charge of providing women with political and military training. In 1969, she was appointed head of Frelimo's Department of Social Affairs, where she actively develops child care and educational centers in northern Mozambique and advocates with the local populations for the importance of sending girls to school. In 1971, Josina died from liver cancer at the age of just 25. Ella Baker. Ella Baker was a brilliant Black hero of the civil rights freedom movement in the U.S. who inspired and guided emerging leaders. She helped to build power amongst Black, brown, and poor people to create solutions for one of the biggest drivers of the injustice today, mass incarceration. Ella played a key role in some of the most influential organizations of the time, including the NAACP, Martin Luther King Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer was an American voting and women's rights activist, community organizer, and a leader in the civil rights movement. She was the co-founder and vice chair of the Freedom Democratic Party, which she represented at the 1964 Democratic National Convention. Hamer also organized Mississippi's Freedom Summer along with Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. She was also a co-founder of the National Women's Political Caucus, an organization created to recruit, train, and support women of all races who wish to seek election for government office. Desi Woods. Desi Woods' name was known all over the world after she was sentenced to 22 years in prison for killing a white man in Georgia with his own gun in 1975 when he tried to rape her. The African People's Socialist Party built the national committee that went on to free Desi Woods in 1981 as part of the legacy of the ongoing struggle of African people for independence and liberation. She is remembered as a courageous African woman who was an example of African resistance. Joanne Little. In 1974, Joanne Little murdered a white prison guard at Beaufort County Jail in Washington, North Carolina. Little was the first woman in United States history to be acquitted using the defense that she used deadly force to resist sexual assault. Assata Shakur was born on 16th of July, 1947 in New York City. She became politically active whilst at college and later joined the Black Panther Party before joining the Black Liberation Army. She was convicted as New Jersey didn't need to prove if she fired the shot that killed an officer there. After her 1977 conviction, she was kept in solitary confinement, totally unbefitting any prisoner. In 1979, she escaped prison and has been living in Cuba, where she has political asylum. She continues to be heralded as a gallant freedom fighter for self-determination for African people. Nom Zamo Winifred Zanyewe Madikezela Mandela, the whole name. Hailed as the mother of South Africa, Winnie Mandikizela Mandela's legacy as an anti-apartheid heroine ultimately was undermined even among some allies by her reputation as an iron-willed ideologue, ruthless in her pursuit of revolution and redress. During Nelson Mandela's 27-year incarceration, she campaigned tirelessly for his release and for the rights of Black South Africans. Suffering years of detention, banishment, and arrest by the white minority regime that runs Africa's most advanced economy, her uncompromising methods in the long struggle against white rule and refusal to forgive and contrasted sharply with the reconciliation espoused by her husband, Nelson Mandela, as he worked to forge a stable pluralistic democracy from the racial division and oppression of apartheid. Winnie Mandela played a pivotal role in the 1976 Soweto student uprising when thousands of Black students took to the streets after a government decree forced all Black schools to use Afrikaans and English as languages of instruction. Marielle Franco, as a Black woman and single mother from the favelas, Franco positioned herself as a representative and defenders of poor Black women and people from the favelas in Brazil. With over 46,500 votes, Franco was one of the 51 people elected, receiving the fifth highest vote total out of more than 1,500 candidates. As a city council member, Franco fought against gender violence, for reproductive rights, and for the rights of favela residents. She chaired the Women's Defense Commission and formed part of a 4-person committee that monitored the federal intervention in Rio de Janeiro. On 13th of March 2018, Franco spoke out on Twitter against the police violence in Rio de Janeiro. The next day, Franco attended a roundtable discussion titled Young Black Women Moving Power Structures. Less than 2 hours after leaving the roundtable, she and her driver, Anderson Pedro Gomez, were fatally shot by 2 men who were driving another car. The men fired 9 shots at them, 4 of which struck Franco, 3 in the head and 1 in the neck. Uhuru. Next slide. I think that's the end. Uhuru. And that's the list of African women that we wanted to recognize from the past and for today as well. And we just hope that we continue to remember these African women and continue to hold them up as part of the long history of African freedom fighting and struggle that continues to push all African people forward. Uhuru.
I want to really appreciate that presentation. And I really want to, before I bring up the next part of the agenda, I really want to say that it is the example in the African People's Socialist Party that should be the example for all freedom struggles around the world as it relates to the place that women must play in the struggle for freedom and self-determination. African women must lead. African women have always led. Always led. And we have got to, really just appreciate that presentation for reminding us of the rich history that African women have in the liberation movement. So now I want to again appreciate Yesterday in that presentation, and I'd like to bring forward the Freedom Mass Choir, which is led by the choir director and administrative assistant for Chairman Omalia Shatella, Comrade Elikia Ngoma. Uhuru.
Uhuru? Uhuru! All right, my name is Elikia Ngoma, the choir director of the Freedom Mass Choir. And before we do our performance, I wanted to acknowledge two people who will not be with us tomorrow, so I wanted to thank them for performing yesterday and today. We have Sister Crystal. She is a tenor voice from here in St. Louis, Missouri. We also have Comrade Naila, our soprano. Joining us today, we have Sister Zonglile, who may not be with us tomorrow. And then we will introduce the rest of the members afterward. Uhuru. Let's give another round of applause to our Freedom Choir. So you know how a lot of the music on the radio gets you, right? Because it's like very repetitive. You hear it first, you hear the song, you don't even like it. You're like, oh, this song is garbage when you hear it on the radio. Then you hear it 1,000 times, and now it's your favorite song, right? Well, now we have the ability to have music that the first time you hear it, it speaks to you, speaks to the nation, and that we have the ability now to develop this beautiful culture among the African nation that allows us to speak African internationalism in musical form. And I really, really want to appreciate the Freedom Mass Choir for that beautiful, and Comrade Alikia for that arrangement. So now I would like to bring back to the stage Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa, who will bring forward our chairman, Omali Yeshitela, for the reading of the political report. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru. Vanguard, Vanguard, we must lead.
African people must be free.
Vanguard, Vanguard, we must lead.
African people must be free.
That's great. Before we start, can you just make sure you have your copy ready with you? And we want to say once again, this Congress is of greatest significance because we just said we must capture power, but for that to happen, we must capture the imagination of African people everywhere. And this work, as I said before, it's happening. We must intensify that work. And you know, we have a slogan when we say, one Africa,
One nation.
one Africa.
One nation.
What we say, we want one leadership, one unified struggle for African people. This is what's happening right now under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. That struggle is happening. And this is a precondition for all of us to be free, for the world to be free. So, without further ado, I would like just to say to everyone here to put your hands together and rise to greet Chairman Omali Yeshitela once again, the leader of the African nation. Hey, Africa. Yeah. Okay. If I may just take a couple of seconds, the last slogan, then I'll hand over to the chairman straight away. Remember this side? Chairman, chairman, this side. Ready? Woo-woo! Okay, chairman.
Uhuru of Africa and comrades, there are a lot of history-making events occurring already during the course of this Congress. not the least of which is the incredible work that's been done and is being done by Comrade Elikia. I continue to be nearly overwhelmed by the culture that resides in our community and the African nation as a whole. But Comrade Elikia, in writing our anthem and other important work that extols a resistance, revolution, Africa, and the party. This is incredible. I haven't seen or known of anything like this since the heyday of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. It is extremely important for the struggle, resistance, existence of a people to be represented in culture, and especially of African people, where culture plays such a critical role in our daily lives. So I just wanted to make that statement. This comrade woman wrote everything that we've heard up to now in terms of the music. She's done the arrangements. She's pulled together rehearsals with African people located all over the country. And then she comes and stands before this choir, which is only a small percentage of the number of people she's pulled into this process, and she stands before this choir and provides this incredible direction. It moves me just greatly. I just wanted to acknowledge it. I think throughout this Congress, what we have been witnessing is the genius and capacity of the African working class once unleashed. Once the working class has access to its own leadership. These comrades who we've been listening to and watching throughout this process didn't just become talented during this 7th Congress, but they have not been properly recognized as a consequence of the fact that they have been involved with petty bourgeois leadership or bourgeois leadership of bourgeois organizations and structures, but to come to their own Congress where the African working class can express its own interests and aspirations. This is unleashing the genius of the masses of our people of the working class, and I really deeply appreciate it. I know from this beginning it doesn't look like that, it doesn't appear to be the case, but I am going to really expedite this process of reading because there is so much that I want to read during this Congress. As I mentioned on yesterday, I will not be able to read the entire document, but we have been reading it together for more than 3 months now. And so we come here, most of us haven't already experienced it. But I think that there's nothing like doing it collectively. And I left off on the reading on yesterday in chapter 4, and I'm going to begin where I left off and move as expeditiously as possible to get as much done as we can. Comrade Charles Barron is back with us. We missed you at the banquet yesterday, but he made a really important concession because he was involved in 1,000 other things as a New York State Assemblyman, and he was determined to be here. So he was. People have often referred to Comrade Charles Barron as a former Black Panther, but he has steadfastly said that there is no such thing as a former Black Panther. So he was here with us earlier on yesterday, but during the time of the banquet, well, y'all showed out, right? He was involved in several conference calls, just taking care of business that he had to do in order to be able to get here. So I wanted to acknowledge that and welcome you, my brother, my comrade, Uhuru. I'm going to start the reading on the bottom of the page, on page 773. I think I'm in the 4th chapter now, is that right? I think this is chapter 4, but it's the bottom of page 73. And I must tell everybody here that Comrade Vince Lawrence brought the book to me. I can't believe it. It's a book I gave him maybe in 1973. And it's a book about Comrade Chairman Mao Zedong. And he was reading this, he said, right before he left, because it was a book that was written about a very difficult time in the Chinese Revolution. And the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Army had suffered some serious setbacks. And yet, Chairman Mao was able to move forward. And the title of the book tells it all about why. He said, because the title of the book is in his mind, A Million Bold Warriors. And even during the difficult periods of setback of our revolution, where they've killed Malcolm, where they killed King, where they killed Lumumba, where they overthrew so many of our forces, destroyed Panthers, jailed so many, and exiled so many people, we had the ability to move forward because we could see the millions of bold warriors that were there to be brought into political life and under the leadership of their own revolutionary organization. The bottom of page 73, our party, the advanced detachment of the African working class, the vanguard of the African Revolution, is unimpressed by the bleatings of the Democratic and Republican parties and the liberals of all nationalities hiding in their shadows. Both bourgeois parties had already fallen into such disrepute that Trump was not an illogical choice for white people to elect. Not to mention that among the Democrats, the contending so-called outsider Bernard Sanders presented the greatest challenge to the party's anointed establishment leader, Hillary Rodham Clinton. The majority of the people in the U.S. are not members of our African People's Socialist Party or movement. In fact, the majority do not know of our existence. But the greatest chance of the people knowing who we are and why they should stand with us is our willingness to take advantage of the disarray among the leading institutions of the colonial white ruling class. We must draw the line by making clear non-opportunist African internationalist positions that expose the system and show the way forward in an unambiguous way. There are some people who are extremely concerned. This is liberals, as we say, of all nationalities, of all stripes. They are concerned because Kavanaugh is going to go to the Supreme Court. Even though I challenge anybody to tell us what the difference is. I really mean that. I challenge anybody to tell us what the difference is. They are concerned because Trump is making all of these negative statements about the FBI and the CIA and our intelligence organizations, that brave men and women who put their lives on the line in defense of our liberties. except when it comes to Ferguson and other places where we try to live and exist. They are upset because Trump has talked about the fake news and all of this. They are upset because the Catholic Church is being, I hate the word again, exposed as an international criminal organization of pedophiles. And so they are in serious state of distress and upset. But the reason they are in a state of distress is because they rely on the social system itself to take us someplace. Even so-called black nationalists and communists and what have you are in this state of concern, but not us. The fact is that fewer and fewer people in this country and around the world have any assumptions, false assumptions, that this government can solve their problems. And it is an extraordinary moment to be alive and to be able to participate in this great struggle at a time when the crisis of imperialism is exposing itself with such clarity. And the only reason that you can be or should be upset is that if you see the crisis of imperialism as your crisis, if you see the crisis of the slave system as your crisis, and it is not our crisis. We celebrate the crisis of white power. We celebrate the crisis of imperialism. In the past, people who have been called communists in this country have talked about the hidden dictatorship of the ruling class. For colonial and subject people, the dictatorship has never been hidden. We've always had to deal with it, a naked, brutal dictatorship, but increasingly, white people are having to take some kind of peek in some ways, even though much of what they see is participating in an element of disinformation. There are many people who are crying today about how, poor Professor Dr. Ford was mistreated by Mr. Kavanaugh. I shall be frank. I don't like the mistreatment of women, but I have no tears. I have no tears left for people, white women, who have just discovered that your husband's brothers, sons, uncles, etc., rape women. I have no idea. You've just discovered when for such a long time you have covered for the rape of African, Mexican, and other oppressed women. I have no tears for white women who are concerned that there is some kind of assault on reproductive rights when Puerto Rican and African women have been used as subjects and test tubes for everything that was provide some kind of reproductive rights and capacity for white women were tested on Puerto Rican, on African women, etc. I have none of that. I know the history of gynecology, for example, in this country and what they've done to African women. And I'm not sympathetic even to white people or white women who want to say that I didn't know. And nor are white people generally sympathetic to that line either, because people have been able to condemn Germans who killed other white people, other Germans who became Jews, right? Who were Jews. who claim I just didn't know. As people were being murdered all around them, I knew about it. And I'm not as smart as white people. White people are the smartest people in the world, got the best education, got everything. And damn it, if I knew it as dumb and backwards and suffering from this great distance from civilization as I do as an African, then damn it, you should have known about it as well. So it's no longer excusable. You can't excuse that anymore. You can't do that anymore. While some liberals are protesting his castigation of the secret political police organizations and the bourgeois colonial media, Trump's revelations are useful in exposing the rot of this social system born of slavery, colonialism, and genocide. A social system born of slavery, colonialism, and genocide. How the hell can it be worth anything? And this is a question that any normal human being must be able to ask, not just the people who are being lynched. Not just the people who are being lynched, because to be able to see or to not see this happening is to deny the humanity of the Africans, of the Puerto Ricans, of the Mexicans, of the indigenous people living in concentration camps today that they call Indian reservations. How can you not see that? All of the peoples in the U.S. and the world are thirsty for real leadership to show the way forward out of the morass of bourgeois lies and deception that pushed them to Trump and the white nationalist Democratic Party left in the first place. Trump makes daily open attacks on the so-called deep state. The term deep state refers to the permanent hidden bodies of ruling class decision makers whose long-term plans are unaffected by changing administrations. Through use of this term, Trump has introduced the question of the state to the millions of people worldwide who never knew of its presence by name. This has forced outright media denials of the existence of the so-called deep state by paid experts of ruling class media outlets and the new Central Intelligence Agency head during his Senate confirmation hearing. Our party's exposure of the role of elections to provide a means of nonviolent struggle for control of the state by contending sectors of the ruling class will now fall on better informed ears. The point is, comrades, we must move forward with our criticism of colonial capitalism without cessation. The white ruling class inadvertently continues to assist our exposure of the true nature of parasitic capitalism and the colonial domination of African people within the U.S. and abroad. We must continue to build the capacity of our people to resist. There are some liberals who would have us engage in an unending fight against fascism that they see in the utterings and actions of Trump. However, we never forget that we are colonized and that democratic colonialism is still colonialism. It is colonialism. The fascism feared by whites and liberals looks very much like the colonialism Africans have experienced in this country for centuries. The liberals would have us turn our backs on the liberation of our people and the colonized peoples of the world to come to the rescue of liberal democratic colonialism. The struggle against fascism serves a sector of the white ruling class and colonial society. But for African people, it only maintains our self-defeating fight to make white people like us and to stop the police from killing and imprisoning us. The struggle against fascism is in many ways similar to the fight against racism in that it is a struggle to find a safe space within colonialism. It is a struggle that protects the colonial capitalist relationship that we have with imperialist white power. It is a struggle that unites us with one sector of colonial power against another sector of colonial power, and it does absolutely nothing to destroy colonialism. Indeed, these are dangerous times, and we don't pretend that this is not a dangerous moment in history. Every time imperialism goes into crisis, it represents a threat, a deeper threat to the oppressed peoples around the world. What we are saying is that this is a crisis. And because it is a crisis, it doesn't mean that we engage in trying to support one sector of the white ruling class versus another sector. Our objective is to overturn the whole damn thing. That's what we have to do in order to survive and prosper as a people. As always, our party, the Advanced Detachment, will not join the herd in fighting to protect the system by fighting fascism or racism. History has taught us that the biggest guarantee we have for any kind of democratic opening is to be found through struggle to limit the influence of the colonial capitalist state in the affairs of our people, political and economic power in the hands of the African working class. For colonized people, this is a measure of democracy. Our power is in the masses of African workers, in the heart of the colonists throughout the U.S. and the world. We must build here among the unorganized and barely organized masses of African workers who, under the leadership of our party, will set the terms for a revolutionary response by the entire African nation that will bring the crisis of imperialism to a head, to a revolutionary conclusion. In the African colonies, the message of our party about the rigged elections will have a more receptive audience than ever. We know about rigged elections. This is crazy. The FBI program targeting black identity extremists is further evidence of the U.S. counterinsurgency carried out by intelligence agencies, also known as the deep state, exposed by the intra-capitalist struggle surrounding the Trump presidency. The high public disregard for the foul, garbage-spewing media outlets of the colonial bourgeoisie gives us the opportunity to elevate and expand the influence of the party's media outlets. The future of our people can only be guaranteed by the success of our party in leading the colonized people throughout the world in an organized struggle to deepen the crisis of imperialism. We do this concretely by constructing a real capacity among the people to wage an unrelenting, unwavering fight against colonialism. We build a popular resistance and hatred of alien and foreign domination. We build a popular resistance and hatred of alien and foreign domination, a resistance to colonialism. We build the institutions of dual power that our party has been constructing for nearly 2 generations. We create the ideological, political, and territorial spaces for the masses to join in the building of dual power, even without the direct intervention of our party. Comrades, sisters, and brothers, our party has been waging this struggle against colonial capitalism for almost 50 years now. We are the only organization that has fought consistently to complete the black revolution of the 60s. We have created a tradition. This is different from saying that we are militant, and that we are good at blocking interstates. We might not know how to block damn interstates, you understand? But we are part of a trajectory to complete a revolution for the liberation of our people. And we have been doing this for almost 50 years. 50 years of the history of resistance, of struggle, has been a part of the process. We've been summing up every Congress that we've had. We've established a tradition of Congress, of the African working class coming together, summing up our understanding of the world, the contradictions in the world, where we've coming from, where we have to go. This is a tradition that has made a profound contribution to the struggle of our people. I don't know of another organization that's doing that within the African world. We do this not as an abstract project based on a collection of position papers representing 1,000 different political trends and tendencies. We are part of a historical continuum that has been busy solving the problems of the revolution from which theory was developed and confirmed through practice. You can tell the effectiveness of African internationalism by the accomplishments of our party. It is our practical experience in advancing our struggle among the African working class that enables us to go into the trenches in the fight against the Trump regime, the latest manifestation of colonial world power. The Trump regime has touted the U.S. meeting with Kim Jong-un, leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, as a major triumph, supposed evidence that his threatening anti-Kim antics drove the Korean leader to the negotiating table. Almost everyone, including Trump's opponents and those made uneasy by the media, agreed that it was Kim's desperation in the face of Trump's threats that is responsible for the June Singapore meeting. If there are some who cannot see through this obvious lie, it is because they are not aware that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which they call North Korea, had always called for direct negotiations with the U.S. It has been the U.S. that has refused to meet with the Korean government, not the other way around. Since its failure to capture all of Korea during the colonial Korean War, the policy of the U.S. government has been to deny the legitimacy of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea that came to power through revolution led by a workers' party. Or at the undeclared conclusion of the war, the U.S. began a process of pumping billions of dollars and capitalist investment into the Republic of Korea or South Korea. The U.S. wanted to show the superiority of colonial capitalism over a self-identified communist government under the authority of indigenous non-white working people. Thousands of U.S. troops have occupied South Korea since the end of the war, where they participate with troops from the Republic of Korea in incessant aggressive war games, practicing, rehearsing the invasion of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The presence and role of China in the current development of U.S.-Korean relations must not be understated. China has its own interests and will doubtlessly work to advance them. There has been much speculation as to whether the U.S. can threaten and bully China with economic sanctions and the like. One thing that we do know is that military intervention of Chinese troops in the Korean War prevented the U.S. from total domination of the Korean Peninsula. China recognizes that the thousands of U.S. troops stationed in the Republic of Korea and other components of the aggressive military presence in the region are there as part of an outdated China containment policy of the U.S. government. It is hard to imagine that China would look kindly at a U.S. assault on Korea that would open a direct military landline to China. The U.S. and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea are engaged in direct talks now because the Koreans have changed the power relations in the Asian Pacific region, and especially on the Korean Peninsula. Indeed, the Koreans have altered the power relations in the world. After months of publicly testing nuclear warheads, despite U.S. threats, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has demonstrated its nuclear capacity and a delivery system that can even reach Trump Tower. All the people of Korea, it says, he's reached the U.S., but all the people of Korea want the reunification of their land and people. All are aware that Trump's prior threats to obliterate North Korea would mean a threat of the existence of all of Korea, the South included. Most people are aware that at this point in history, a U.S. attack on Korea would not be a one-sided attack, and that while the North could not match the U.S. in quantity and quality of arms, they could certainly deliver a devastating military response that would involve the entire Korean peninsula and much of Asia. In other words, the U.S.-Korean meeting represents a major policy shift on the part of the U.S., not the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Therefore, if fear was a factor in making the meeting happen, it was not the fear by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Whatever the immediate consequences of the meeting, one thing is certain: the world has changed considerably, and it will not go unnoticed by the oppressed that the U.S. no longer has absolute hegemony in Asia and the world. If developing Korean muscularity can push the U.S. imperialists back, there will be a great rush by others to attain a capacity to resist U.S. imperial terror. I don't know if y'all remember, no, y'all too young to remember, but they used to have in these comic books and things like that, this advertisement of this white guy and his girlfriend on the beach, and a little skinny white guy, and the guy with muscles would come back and kick the sand in the face of the skinny white guy. And the skinny white guy runs into an ad about how you can get some muscles. And he didn't run around trying to get the big white guy to like him. He went and got some muscles. He started bodybuilding and the rest of it. So when the big white guy with muscles came back, there was another big white guy with muscles in the place of the skinny white guy who didn't have any muscles. That changed the equation considerably. The advent of China and Korea as major players in the world is further evidence of the retreat of absolute white power that defines the world today. This retreat of absolute white power, you must really understand this. This is major. Even when you look at the disarray and the havoc that's being raised by U.S. imperialism in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, and other places in the Americas, I mean, they're fighting on every front. The people are pushing back in a way that is extraordinary and historical, and certainly that's happening in Asia. It's not just happening in Asia, it's happening in Africa, even though it's white power in China engaged principally in the struggle for Africa, and we are not much in the equation. It used to be that the U.S. just dominated everything. The U.S. just finished crushing pushing France to a point where France has had to concede to the U.S. Leadership and authority over what was once recognized in Africa as French spheres of interest. France has had to retreat. The U.S. is there now. But overshadowing all of that, the fastest growing economic force in Africa is China. And this is despite the fact, comrades, that just a few years ago, compañeros, that the U.S. used to joke about, you don't have a Chinaman's chance. They don't say that anymore. Not because the Chinese learned to sing "We Shall Overcome." I never saw a Chinese singing "We Shall Overcome." I saw Chinese doing rap music, but I never saw a Chinese singing "We Shall Overcome." So the whole power relationship in the world is changing. And that's what must be understood. That's why these political reports are so important. Because what happens is that we get born into a situation that gives the impression it haven't always been like this. It hasn't always been like this. There used to be a time when the peoples of the world wanted to be free and tried to rise up for freedom, and somebody says the white man is coming, they throw down the guns and run. Doesn't happen that way anymore. People pick up the gun and run toward them, right? We said that it was only a few years ago that the phrase "not having a Chinaman's chance" reflected the semi-colonial and economically deprived status of China in the world. The fact that China is boldly intruding on economic and political terrain that white nationalists and imperialists have previously assumed their prerogative is part of the growing global trajectory of the oppressed to push European colonialism out of our lives and out of existence. The European Union, at one time perceived by some as a big economic competitor of the US, is currently in disarray. The departure of England from the group and others threatening to do the same compounds the implications of the unremitting economic and political crisis of Greece, the threat to the integrity of Spain's presumed national identity, and the Eurosceptic government that has come to power in Italy. And, perhaps, I hope everybody will read the entire political report, because one of the things that we've done here, too, is reintroduce the whole question of the national question here, and how the white nation, that is the European nation, and even you will hear white pundits refer to that as, from time to time. They like to define the national question as something that exists, that pertains to these self-declared nation states like Spain, for example. But Spain is struggling like hell. There's a huge struggle. We met with them when I was in Russia. The Catalan, the people who were trying to wage their struggle in the wealthiest part of Spain to separate from Spain. Italy, huge struggle. We met with some of them when I was in Russia, of people who were involved in the struggle to free themselves or transform the political terrain there in Italy. So the world is really changing right before our faces. So, and the thing about the national question is this thing that we refer to as the nation, as the European nation, is something that consolidated itself, this sense of sameness based on a particular economic foundation, consolidated itself during the slave trade and colonialism. Before slavery, there was no such thing as a white man. Before slavery, there was no such thing as Europe or European. You just had a group of different warring tribes over what we now call Europe, fighting with each other. What changed that and gave them a sense of sameness was their involvement collectively, well, initially, individually, in enslaving Africans and colonizing the world. This is what united them as one. And this is what created the whole white nationalist scheme. You can go all over Europe and find black Sambo. We do it all over Europe, we travel. You can find all of these reflections because they created their whiteness as something that reflected on what they characterize as our blackness. And everybody knows that whiteness is good and blackness is not. So we say that war continues to undermine the stability of the Middle East. Yemen, an ally of Iran, strategically located at the mouth of the Red Sea shipping lane, has endured the ruthless slaughter and starvation of its population by a U.S.-Israel-supported war by Saudi Arabia. And it's really the United States government that's doing this. The voluntary self-censorship of U.S. and European media serves as a function of the war. They talk about freedom of the press. My ass, self-censorship. That's why you cannot read in the bourgeois media about the terror being inflicted on Africans, on Mexicans, on the indigenous people, on what's happening in Yemen, and all these other places. This so-called democratic media, this so-called free speech, etc., is nonsense. It's self-censorship. They censor themselves so that nobody will know, even the oppressed don't have access to the information about our oppression. The U.S. war that destroyed the Iraqi government of Saddam Hussein has resulted in the growing influence of Iran in that region. The U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia have combined to combat Iran in a variety of ways that include the war against Yemen and the economic quarantine of Iran. After 5 years, the U.S. initiated war against Syria that stemmed from the counterinsurgent intent to overthrow the regime of Bashar al-Assad continues to be fraught with a major potential for imperialist world war. Under Trump, the U.S. and Israel have attacked Syria to target Syrian allied Iranian troops, also risking military confrontation with Russian troops deployed in Syria. Contributing to the crisis of imperialism is the fact that China has initiated a major economic project designed to further challenge the Atlanticist arrangement. The $100 billion Asian infrastructure, $100 billion Asian infrastructure investment bank, created by the Xi Jinping administration, already has commitments from at least 21 Asian countries. Australia, Indonesia, and South Korea were noticeably absent from the deal after severe pressure from the U.S. I don't know if that's changed or not by now. Many of the members of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank are countries of the Chinese-led Belt and Road Initiative. These major Chinese economic projects that necessarily encroach on the heretofore domination of the world by Euro-American capital contribute to the overall crisis of imperialism. At the same time, other countries find themselves looking for options outside the Atlanticist sphere of control. Even the outgoing scandal in South African politics involving former president and African National Congress ANC leader Jacob Zuma revolves around charges of corruption, conveniently leveled at Zuma by equally corrupt officials opposed to his apparent coziness with Indian and possibly Chinese capital. In Africa, at least one government has been overthrown by France because of an attempt to initiate a new deal with China that would free Ivory Coast from the clutches of historical colonialism, French colonialism. Hugo Chavez of Venezuela and Muammar Gaddafi of Libya were two of the leaders who were undermined and or killed because of attempts made to escape domination of the U.S. military-backed dollar, still the leading world currency. Imperialism continues to exist. Colonial capitalism continues to be the dominant social system on earth. However, there is an uneasy equilibrium where the struggles of the oppressed and colonized peoples of the world calls into question everything that shaped the political and economic features of the world. This crisis has reached its tipping point. The crisis of imperialism is characterized by extreme volatility that is also reflected in the politic and consciousness of the peoples of the world. Europeans, and especially Americans, are experiencing distress, the growing alcoholism, drug addiction, suicides, mass killings, and a host of social afflictions and diseases of despair. This is what they call it, diseases of despair, have caused an unusual spike in the death rate of white people, especially middle-aged white men in the United States. On the other hand, this volatility is represented by growing struggles of colonized peoples, boldly challenging their relationship to imperialist white power. This is happening globally and within the U.S. among Africans in the imperialist center. The imperialists are struggling to find their place during this crisis. All kinds of new possibilities are opening up for our revolution. Central to all our possibilities is the growth of the organization, capacity, and influence of our party, the key resource available to our forcibly dispersed, colonized nation. New alliances will also present themselves to our struggle as the old alliances among the imperialists are dying and or reorganizing themselves. In the past, when certain fissures emerged within the imperialist camp, a movement was able to form important relationships with the governments of Cuba, Algeria, and Congo-Brazzaville, among others. Vietnam and China also played a key support role to anti-colonial freedom fighters. Even some bourgeois nationalist governments of Africa and the Middle East were willing to leverage their power by aiding the struggle of Africans in the US and throughout Africa during an era when the Soviet Union also represented a counterbalance to US power. As the balance of power continues to shift and the crisis deepens, the coming years will bring to light the possibility of new allies and alliances which embrace the African anti-colonial struggle. Comrades, sisters, and brothers, the new world we are fighting for is possible within our lifetime. It is up to us, Africans and other oppressed and colonized peoples of the world, to achieve the political clarity and organizational capacity to provide the revolutionary leadership required by colonized nations and workers to overturn this system in critical flux. We must bring about the new world without oppressors and the oppressed, exploiters and the exploited, a world in which African workers have power over our lives and future. Our 7th Congress is the contribution of the African People's Socialist, is the contribution the African People's Socialist Party is making to this end. I know I've been reading for a long time. Do you mind just standing up for a minute? Just stand up just for a minute and let the blood leave that part of your body that you've been resting on. And if we're fortunate, it'll rush to our heads. Thank you, comrades. I've gone now to chapter 6. And I'm on page 112. This is the chapter 6, as I mentioned. This title is the regional strategy, turning dual power into practice. I'm hoping that we'll have enough time to go back to, I think, chapter 5, because there's some critical ideological stuff that I hope we have an opportunity to speak about. On page 112, our struggle against colonial capitalism must be rooted in the actual colonized territories that we occupy. This is the essence of dual and contending power. The victory of our party will come as a consequence of our success in transforming every colonized African community into a conscious, active opponent of colonialism. We will take organization and ideological development to the heart of the African working class communities where the colonial contradictions are concentrated. You know, that's how we try to work. That's what we're trying to do in St. Louis here. And I see the potential for what I'm talking about also in East New York. Just watching that area where Comrade Charles Barron has organized out of now for so many years. The whole thing is colonized people is different from like what happens in the center of some imperialist countries where the so-called workers, can shut down the factories and other things like that. Colonized people have had always to fight what the Chinese and the Chinese developed and the Vietnamese perfected, a people's war. That it is a movement. It has to be a movement of the nation. It's a national mobilization. Not everybody in the nation is revolutionary. Not everybody in the nation is going to play the same role. But everybody in the nation is sympathetic to the idea of being free of white domination, white power. And even the African petty bourgeoisie is sympathetic, if only because they want white power out the way so that they can become the new white power in blackface. So part of the strategic task that we recognize is we say the victory of our party will come as a consequence of our success in transforming every colonized African community into a conscious, active opponent of colonialism. And what you will find is that young Africans in our communities all around the world are active opponents to colonialism. They just don't have the ideological tools and the organization to make it make sense in the best possible way. But every day you see this resistance that's happening among young Africans. It's reflected in almost all of our lives. That's what scares some of the old Negroes, because these young Africans, they have no respect, none whatsoever, for the system, the social system. They don't like the way you dress, they do everything in defiance, always defiance. And in St. Louis, they carry guns and too frequently shoot each other. But we can straighten that out, so to speak. So I've just made a statement about the significance of the political and ideological work that we do in our communities, among our people, among the working class. This is different from some debate that you will have with college professors and professional careerists. I'm not talking about that. I don't give a damn what the professional protesters and etc. But if those comrades who live in these communities right here understand colonialism, who the enemy is, the red, black, and green, and what have you, we have a formidable force that they will never, ever be able to control. We will take organization and ideological development to the heart of the African working class communities where the colonial contradictions are concentrated. They are not concentrated on college campuses. The reality of our theory of dual power will be made more obvious in this regional strategy that we will implement coming out of our 7th Congress. In the political report to the party's 2017 plenary, we began the discussion of the need for our regional work to function properly as a critical vehicle for the development of the party and implementation of our political agenda. The reason that we're in St. Louis today, we came to St. Louis after the murder of Mike Brown. A lot of people did, drawn here for different reasons. Some came to cover up for white power. And the thing that brought us here to St. Louis, because you got to remember, there have been uprisings in this community before St. Louis, before what happened on Canfield Drive. But before it could develop anything, Sharpton got there. Or they were able to helicopter Jesse Jackson into the situation. And so that they would tire the people out with ridiculous prayer sessions, march until you exhaust, that kind of stuff prevailed. But the thing that called us to St. Louis is something we had not heard since the 1960s, something we had been looking for. Remember, one of the highest expressions of revolutionary organization in the 1960s was the Black Panther Party. It, in fact, became a revolutionary center in this country and for much of the world where African people are located, certainly. And the slogan of the Black Panther Party that came from the streets, from the community, was "Off the pig." Off the pig. Because the police, that was the first line of defense of the social system. That was the physical manifestation of the colonial government. Most of our people don't even know who is in the government, but they can tell you the name of particular pigs in our community that constantly harass us. So most our relationship with the government is mostly through the police and the courts and things like that. And so when this thing happened on Canfield Drive, the slogan word that got out first came directly from the African class that had that relationship to the colonial government, and that slogan was, "Kill the police." Whoa. pack my bags. I'm going to St. Louis. I'm going to St. Louis. Yeah, the giant has awakened. But of course, the African working class came under a major assault here. And it wasn't all by the police. It was by those charlatans who came in. It was by the people who would take this resistance of the masses and hijack this revolutionary process, who would come in and change, kill the police to hands up, don't shoot, to Black Lives Matter. What the hell are you talking about? When has black life ever mattered to colonialism? It has never mattered. What matters is black. And walking in one of the demonstrations here, you will probably see on one of the videos that we will show, probably, me walking in a demonstration here in St. Louis, Ferguson. And walking in this demonstration, this African working class young woman is walking behind me and pestering me. I said, what's your name? She said, Herdosia. I said, where that name come from? She said, it's Greek. I thought you were Greek. But, and she said, I'm interested, right? And take my number, etc. And, you know, that's our job. You know, we're organizing. So, this is extraordinary. You were in St. Louis. There'd be 3,000, 4,000, 20,000 people out. And all the people who are organizing, they don't have pencil and pad. They're not taking names down. They're not organizing and bringing anybody into an organization, right? So we took this comrade's name. And she was new to political life. She was a Christian evangelist. And the point that I want to make is that we have a responsibility to take the theory and the philosophy smack dab in the middle of the African working class. And we did that, and this young woman, who had never been involved in political life proper, who had been an evangelist for the Christian church, for the Church of God in Christ, the one that I used to go to, and that was some serious churches there, boy. We out-churched the white people who brought Christianity there. Well, I'm telling you, we knew how to do it, didn't we? Yeah. And because we were there, this young woman is one of the most influential African leaders of our party in the world, and that is Comrade Kalambai. I mentioned this because the millions of unorganized African workers are in these damn communities, and you can't wait for them to come to your meeting on the university campus. You can't assume that they're going to read all these political papers that you're going to write, etc. We got to go to our class and turn the African community, every place we live, has to be turned into active and conscious opponents of colonialism, white domination, any domination of our people. And that's what we're talking about here. And I have to escalate this process, don't I? So I want to, I have to read some of this. So addressing the need for the party to fight for our regional structure, the political report of the 2017 plenary had this to say. It says, the leadership of our regional work based on the organizational structure of the so-called national party is something that has not been vigorously fought for within our party. Again, this is due in part to the limitations of our party's national secretary general. Nevertheless, the responsibility, I'm on page 112 still. Nevertheless, the responsibility for leadership of the party's regional work falls squarely on the shoulders of the regional leaders themselves. Going forward, the party must require a dedicated and demonstrably strict adherence to party building by the regional leaders, all of them, all the time. And the regional structure is becoming increasingly important strategically in terms of organizing the party everywhere, because somebody has to be in charge of taking the party out. You just can't have little groups of people in different places. Somebody has to be in charge, and some committee has to be in charge of taking the party out. So here we are in St. Louis, Missouri, and we are surrounded by 8 different states. It borders 8 states, borders, is it St. Louis or Missouri? Missouri, 8 states. And so we can't just be satisfied in sitting up on 4101 West Florissant. We got to take the entire damn region. And so we have to have leaders, and we have to have committees that has that responsibility, and you got to produce. This ability to hide in the party, I'm in the party, what the hell does that mean? How many spears did you sell? How much work are you doing to recruit other Africans like yourself into the party? What is your plan of action for bringing into this committee, not only our folk here, but in Kentucky, in Arkansas, in what, Oklahoma? Is Oklahoma one of those places? In Illinois, whatever. We have to have a regional strategy that takes the work out everywhere, and that's what we are doing. So I'm not going to go over some aspects of this, but I am going to page 114. And under the subhead, Building Party Regions as Political Economic Hubs. Henceforth, every region must be recognized as a political economic hub of the party. Somebody brought me some tea. Henceforth, every region must be recognized as a political economic hub of the party. Our regional political work must be forwarded as a manifestation of the economic trajectory of our party towards self-determination. Our regional political work must be forwarded as a manifestation of the economic trajectory of our party towards self-determination. In other words, our political work is the anti-colonial representation of the struggle against economic dependency, the essential component of colonialism. These regional political economic hubs must inform our recruitment and membership drives and party assignments. Comrade Deputy Chair, you heard that? Because Comrade Deputy Chair sees all this regional work and economic work, but what we're saying is that these regional political economic hubs must inform our recruitment and membership drives and party assignments. So in these particular hubs, we now don't just simply recruit people where they are. We do recruit people where they are, but we assign people where they are needed based on this regional structure and strategy that we're talking about. Our basic recruitment targets remain the same as laid out in the political report in the past 2 Congresses: African women, labor, students, and prisoners. We must now be conscious of a real need to recruit and assign forces within the regions to facilitate the economic development, political promotion, and protection of the institutions of our party and movement. The economic component of the regional hubs of the party, operating under the leadership of the Deputy Chair, Onezene Ishatella, whose office is responsible for all our economic work, must have the responsibility for building the party's regional economic presence. Each of the party's regions must become custodians of the economic strategy of the party for advancing this critical component of the anti-colonial struggle for self-reliance. Each of the regions would have the assignments of building the party's economic work within its designated area of responsibility. In addition to the political work implicit in their presence, all our Uhuru houses must become economic outlets for all the products from our related enterprises. Currently, most of the party's economic work is consolidated in specific institutions within the 4 regions being considered. The oldest Uhuru House community organizing center is located in Oakland, California in the Western region. Oakland is also the location of Uhuru Furniture and Collectibles and Uhuru Foods and Pies, 2 of our most successful economic enterprises that have been in place for 3 decades or more. Our economic institutions are also regular features at markets and fairs throughout the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area. St. Petersburg, Florida, in the southern region, is also home to an Uhuru House in Uhuru Jiko, a commercial community kitchen that functions as an incubator for community enterprises. The Tyrone Lewis Gym is also in St. Petersburg. Uhuru Foods and Pies has been a successful, long-time, and highly respected participant in a local market there. The southern region is also home to Zenzele Consignment Shop, an economic institution operated by the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project in Huntsville, Alabama. Uhuru Furniture and Collectibles and the One Africa, One Nation Marketplace are 2 important economic institutions in Philadelphia in the northern region. In fact, Uhuru Furniture has been an economic and political fixture in the region for 25 years or more. All these institutions provide some employment and income to Africans within their respective regions. For example, in Philadelphia alone, scores of Africans have been able to create successful businesses from vending at the One Africa, One Nation marketplace. This is a marketplace where there are at least 100 vendors, 100 vendors. This is our One Africa, One Nation marketplace that come out. And people feed their families often through this process. When including the numbers of Africans benefiting from their relationship to our economic institutions in Florida, they probably amount to many more in business creation and employment. Our economic enterprises are also anti-colonial political institutions that constantly win practical support for the issues confronting the international African community, especially those of reparations and anti-colonial economic development. We are constantly reminded of the significance of these institutions. They are concrete manifestations of our theory, and their implementation under the leadership of Deputy Chair's office is an important example of the unity between the political and the economic. Now, the party truism that politics is simply concentrated economics must be better understood and more consciously reflected in every aspect of our work. Politics is simply concentrated economics everywhere in the world, almost, except for us. Because usually we ain't got no economics. But the thing is, the politic must reflect the economic interests, and critical to that is self-reliance, anti-colonial self-reliance. That's the economic interest, so you don't have it now. And white people know that you ain't got it, but they still make a plan on your money even though they know you ain't got it. They call it layaway. They say, come and put something down on it. And that's what we are saying also. We got a layaway plan. This is the layaway plan. It is not everything that we're going to get. We project the future of independent economic economy, anti-colonial economic economy. That's what we have to be able to see That's what we have to be able to fight for. And you don't start that off with a major corporation. If you do, it's Soros. I'm gonna look for Soros connected to you someplace, because it ain't ours, right? But this is what we project, and we're putting something down on the future when we do this. We must build all our work, beginning with the regions as reflections of our intent to seize control of the productive forces of the cruelly oppressed and exploited colonized African nation. This is what is meant by the total liberation of Africa and African people worldwide. This is what is meant ultimately by winning self-determination. This is what is meant by the adage that there is no political self-determination without economic self-reliance. There is no political self-determination without economic self-reliance. That's why you see where they're attacking Venezuela, starving. That's why they're attacking every place they can, starving. That's why you can't find, that's why you live in what they call food deserts, starving, and maintain the dependency on our oppressors who use our own resources as the means to oppress us. We are now in the process of recapturing control of our own resources to build and develop our own capacity. Our political objective to liberate Africa and African people is a statement of our intent to achieve the economic capacity to create and recreate real life, something that cannot happen as long as Africa and Africans are forced to endure colonial captivity by foreign and alien powers. Colonialism. Can't do it. You can't do it. And some people are satisfied because they don't believe you can beat the white man. They don't believe that you can have power. And even if they think you can have power, they don't trust it because they have bought into what white people have taught them about us. The leadership for all our work is located within the Central Committee. The party will now confer legitimacy on the regional structures and work by learning to successfully integrate the work of the entire Central Committee to that end. Up to now, the party's regional work has occurred in a vacuum of sorts, with an inferred assumption that the success of that work depended solely on the respective leading regional committees. Some of what I'm reading here is groundbreaking within our party. We don't know how to do all of what I'm talking about now. We just know that this is what has to be done. We set the task before ourselves, and we come together and engage in all kinds of struggles and work to make it happen. I think that we are on the right path. We don't know how to make all this happen. But I'm convinced that it can happen. I'm convinced that it must happen. I'm convinced that we have to free the productive forces of our people. I'm convinced that this thing that we talk about, that all politics is simply concentrated economics, is real. That's real. And the political aims of our movement is self-determination. That's the highest expression of democracy. That's what it means for people to be free. And that's what it means to be able to feed, clothe, and house yourself. That's the problem we got. We ain't got a problem because white people don't like us. We got a problem because they have taken from us our ability to be self-reliant, to take care of ourselves. That's what make your preachers into punks. That's what make all the people who's supposed to be your leaders. They buy them, purchase them, coerce them, seduce them, and what have you. But we, the far-seeing representatives of the African working class and the African nation, can see a future without them. And there's a double entendre there. We can see a future without them. With them, there is no future, you see. The leadership of all our work is located in the Central Committee. So the Central Committee has to work it out, has to pull it together about how we're going to make all this stuff function as it needs to function. However, every regional leader sits on the Central Committee that is responsible for carrying out the mandates from our Congresses and planning much of our work. This helps us to understand that regional party work is part and parcel of our international work. You say regional. For purpose of this Congress, it must be understood that this Congress represents not only the African People's Socialist Party USA, but it also represents the party internationally. For the purpose of this Congress, this 7th Congress, before this is over, we'll say something more about that, because our 8th Congress is going to be a world Congress, and it is going to happen in South Africa. The Secretary General also sits on our Central Committee along with the Deputy Chair, who leads the party's economic work. All the leaders of our mass work, NPDOM, ANWO, APDEP, etc., also occupy seats of the Central Committee. Along with the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, headquarters of the production and distribution of party ideology, the regional leaders and other Central Committee members are key to how the party's integration of human and material resources will be achieved under the leadership of the chair. With the strategy of turning the regions into political and economic hubs, we will see an exponential leap in the production and distribution of party and party-related economic products and influence. With the strategy of turning the regions into political and economic hubs, we will see an exponential leap in the production and distribution of party and party-related economic products and influence. Comrades, I want to send a shout out to the African People's Socialist Party, Occupy Tanzania of South Africa, Uhuru comrades, I know you're participating. And even though the quality of sound wasn't what it should have been, you would have seen this extraordinary African woman, Cask. I think she might be 26 or 27 years old, located in Kenya, South Africa, who's leading our work to build there. I want to salute this comrade, this very heroic woman working under the most extraordinary kinds of circumstances to build the party there. We are going to be free. That's our objective. And comrades such as those, along with the comrades that we've recruited in Australia, I want to send a shout out to the comrades in Australia. I know that comrades in India have been reaching out to us. I don't think they have come into organization yet, but certainly the comrades in Australia. So similarly, the production and mass distribution of the party's theory, especially through the Burning Spear, will make a major leap forward. The success of the party's regional work will depend on the success of each regional leader and committee. This is where the leadership to build local party organizations and offices will be concentrated. Much of the party's recruitment efforts will also be brought down to earth within the local party organizations and offices that must be built in every colonized community within the African nation, everywhere. Currently, the economic work we are most involved in promoting is the Black Power Blueprint. This is a major economic project that has brought inspiration to Africans throughout the U.S. and elsewhere. In a short period of time, a matter of months, Comrade Deputy Chair Olazine Shatella has driven this project, most often from the construction sites themselves, in the thick of dirt and dust and the torrid, sometimes suffocating heat of a St. Louis summer without air conditioning, and during the cruel, numbing cold of winter in temperatures that are often below freezing. Politically, the party has built a meaningful presence since the 2014 assassination of 18-year-old Mike Brown and subsequent generalized resistance of the African working class. The African People's Socialist Party has been the only revolutionary organization of the African working class in St. Louis to have built an independent political presence to further the liberation of our people from the colonial chokehold that starves us of resources and freedom. The headquarters of NPDOM is now located in St. Louis, where its president, Comrade Kalambayi Andanet, was born and raised. Comrade Kalambayi, new to our party and to political life, has brought with her the spirit of the African working class and exemplifies the leadership of real-life African women, as opposed to the airbrushed imitations offered up by the white ruling class and the African petty bourgeois collaborations. The African People's Socialist Party has a real presence in St. Louis. Somebody just showed me I have a minute left. Is that for the total piece? Is that for the total piece? Oh, just for this section. Help me, somebody. No, it's not. I want to be disciplined because I know we have a lot of stuff to cover. 11:50. Okie dokie. Nah. I thought I would have been finished this by now. I do want to just continue to say a little more about the regional strategy. So let me just say a little more. The African People's Socialist Party has a real presence in the St. Louis-Ferguson area. Our community meetings bring out regular people, children, and high school students who have given their own twist to African internationalist polity, taken them to their neighborhoods and the colonial schools. Is Comrade Naila in the room? Where you at? Comrade Naila? Choir practice? Okay. We let her practice choir. She is one of the recruits. She's a 16-year-old high school student who leads membership. What is that, Comrade Kalambayi? For the local International People's Democratic Movement work. Outreach. And outreach for the Keep 28 campaign. And what? And the youth liaison. She's 16 years old. You haven't met her, but, I just point her out. She's an extraordinary force, but that's what we've run into here in St. Louis. That's what we've organized. Neo-colonial office holders who have handed over the resources of our colonized communities to the bankers and white colonial rulers of the city have begun to create paltry imitations of our party programs. They are attempting to use the politics of economic success of the party and Black Power blueprint to endear themselves to our people. But they have a big problem. Politics is truly concentrated economics, and their politics ring hollow because they respond to the economic interests of the colonizer and not the colonized. Our economic project is aptly named Black Power Blueprint because self-reliance is key to self-determination, to the struggle against colonial subjugation. Ours is a blueprint that enthralls the entire colonized African population, a blueprint that is the possession of the much maligned African working class. This is why it is supported by skilled African workers who we have hired as contractors and who, because of their unity with the Black Power blueprint, struggle to uplift the African community, go above and beyond what a paycheck could ever bring. And I should mention, these are Africans who we never met before, who are contractors. And in addition to the African workers, Mexican workers, contractors. I'm not talking about the cheap labor source that you see snatched up everywhere and who have united with what it is that we're doing. are those the comrades who do the roof, did the roof, you know, and what have you, on 4101 West Florissant. And we've consciously concentrated this project in the hands of the colonized people here, the African people in the first place. And then comrades, as I mentioned, the Mexican comrades who bring their skills and their unity with the project that we're working on. Several of the contractors have given discounts on the cost of their labor and have even made financial contributions to the success of the project that they are able to see represent their interests as African colonial subjects. So here we are paying these guys to do work. And then at the fundraisers we have, they're giving money to the project. The African contractors are beginning to see the Vanguard. They, like the residents of the neighborhood associations whose meetings we attend, have been won to the Black Power blueprint because of what it obviously brings to our community that has been suffering political and economic quarantine and deterioration. It is the first glimpse of concrete development most have seen in ages. It is the only glimpse of concrete development that is initiated and led by the advanced detachment of the African working class anywhere in the world. In St. Louis, we have transformed the 9,000 square foot, 3-story, formerly abandoned and once deteriorating community eyesore on a main thoroughfare into a model of development. It is the site of our latest Uhuru House and the center of much of the party's Midwest regional leadership. In addition to the Uhuru House, we acquired 2 commercial buildings of similar size across the street. These buildings were demolished, and along with the 2 other contiguous lots we have acquired, are being transformed into an event space, African Community Garden, and One Africa, One Nation Marketplace, to address the cultural and material needs of the working class community. We have acquired other properties to further economic and political projects under the leadership of the African working class. Among them is a massive building that was once a boathouse, known as, once a boat dealership known as the Boathouse on another major thoroughfare. This will become the site of Uhuru Bakery Cafe and the African Independence Workforce Program that will provide training and employment for Africans whose prior captivity within the colonial prison system prevents them from being hired and trained elsewhere. We are practical revolutionaries. African internationalism is a theory of practice. We have always struggled to make concrete our goals and objectives. We do indeed constitute the advanced detachment, the Vanguard, and general staff of the African Revolution. Moving forward, we must use the economic and political base we have developed in the U.S. to enhance our regional work throughout the African world. The Office of the Deputy Chair must give serious consideration to the establishment of an export-import enterprise that can begin with the import of African garments and fabrics directly from the African continent. Eventually, we will be capable of establishing factories where we can design and construct our own clothing for export to the U.S., Europe, and Caribbean, especially the Bahamas. When we say factories, we're not necessarily talking about grand structures and buildings or what have you. We're talking about the ability for African workers in their own spaces, sometimes in their backyards and what have you, to set up the machinery and what have you to produce the kinds of garments, and that they are actually partners in this process so that we are involved in economic development on both sides of the Atlantic and within the anti-colonial movement. This enterprise can create economic development for party organizations in Africa, and the export of apparel and other accessories can lead to the creation of storefront economic operations in the colonized, economically dependent African communities in the U.S., Europe, the Caribbean, and elsewhere. Zenzele Consignment in Huntsville, Alabama, and anywhere else it is established, can supplement its inventory through this enterprise, as can Uzi Clothing, Impedance Institution, and Decolonize, the African National Women's Organization Economic Front. All these economic fronts. We should be able to distribute our imported African garments, supplemented with accessories and other cultural and health-related products like shea butter, etc., oils, and incense, soaps, and related products are inexpensive and should not take too much overhead. This enterprise could offer resources to support our local work and evoke the spirit of self-reliance within our resource-starved, colonized communities right at the doorstep of the people. They talk about food deserts. They push all kind of economic activity out of the community. They talk about food. We're bringing it right back to the community, right at their doorstep. You walk right out of your doorstep. You go to the nearest International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement local office or the storefront that they've opened up to carry the products that we're talking about. They can find burning spear, they can find the books that come from our burning spear productions and what have you. They can find the shea butters that's produced by Zenzele, by Annual. They can find clothing that comes from Zenzele. And from our other enterprises, Uzi, and what have you, they can find the Uhuru pies right there in the neighborhood and what have you. We put it right there. It can help to bring some jobs. It can help also a community to begin to internalize the notion of self-reliance. Self-reliance. We can do this for ourselves. It pushes back gentrification, because the kind of political and economic activity that we're involved in makes this unfriendly to what white people like to refer to as investors who come into our communities to capture them. The working class can be activated in its own interest. This is what we're talking about doing here. West Africa will be the location for export-import jump-off enterprise. Right now, Ghana appears to be the likeliest place. But there are maybe other places in West Africa as well. I think our contacts and experiences in Ghana favor it as the regional center for our West Africa work. From Ghana, we can embark on economic activity throughout the region. And I want to say that we've got a plan of action from East Africa, from this sister that I'm talking about in Kenya, that talks about economic development and how that can be made manifest, and we're going to struggle with that as well. And here I say I do not have a suggestion of what kind of economic activity we can develop in Southern Africa. The strength of our party work in occupied Tanzania demands that we establish a regional office there. Much of our work there will have to be subsidized for a while, but I am confident that with consistent leadership, we will build a formidable organization and political presence in this strategically important, critical location in Africa. I'm confident that the unity of our party forces in occupied Tanzania or South Africa will enable the party to develop the regional presence necessary for our mission. I want to say in terms of South Africa, we are really seriously considering establishing the African People's Solidarity Committee in South Africa to go for those white people. Because those white people in South Africa do not need to be able to float around calling themselves Africans and what have you, since it's now convenient. They need to be united in the project for black power. And so that's part of what it is that we want to do. And so that's going to be part of the economic front that we are anticipating happening in South Africa. And I know we got some willing comrades from the Solidarity movement who already packed up and ready to make the trip. The party's political work in occupied Tanzania will also be informed by our determination to achieve economic independence and the actual capture of our existing resources. But even before we do that, or even as we are doing that, there are other things that we have to do in South Africa. We are growing. We are in, what, 6 provinces? How many? We're in 6 provinces in South Africa right now. We have party presence. young Africans trying to make this thing happen. Listen, the comrades there are extraordinary. I'm telling you. You haven't read this political report, but they have read it line for line. They have studied it. They can quote it. They know exactly what's in here, and they're fighting to try to implement that there. They are already organizing annual. They're organizing the African International Student Organization. They're building everywhere there. And so we're going to have to facilitate that. We're going to have to do whatever it is possible to do from this end to make it possible. I'm talking about comrades who before we went there never eaten in a restaurant. You understand what I'm talking about? And we are located in places so that we are like in Limpopo in South Africa, which is right north and next to the Mozambique border, all the way down to the Cape, on both Eastern and Western Cape. That's where, and from Johannesburg to the Eastern Cape, it's like 14 hours by vehicle. We ain't got no vehicles. We got all these comrades that they're trying to build. We got to facilitate that. We got to be able to make it possible for our leaders to move around and to get these comrades where they need to be at any given moment. And so we must use all our creativity to develop other resources that are also linked to the struggle to build our party and revolutionary mission. We must struggle to achieve an ability to print the burning spear in occupied Zambia. They need to print it right there. There's no other revolutionary publication on the ground there. That's extraordinary. They sell the spear when we can get it there. It's difficult getting anything. Getting it there. But at the time of the writing of this political report, we are also studying the plan of action for our economic development work in Kenya and East Africa. The party's presence there appears to be growing in our organizational capacity under the leadership of a dynamic young woman who has accepted the overall strategy of our party to build an independent political capacity to seize the power to make anti-colonial work successful in concert with the economic work of the entire African Socialist International. We must make decisions about our economic front in Europe. We will have a market for our African garments and accessories there, and possibly uhuru foods and pies. Some of our garments could be produced in Europe for export to the US and other markets, especially the Bahamas. Additionally, we are intent on developing a market within the colony itself. This means that we will be constant evangelists of revolutionary African culture. You know, every February, people, drag out their moth-eaten or newly acquired dashikis and what have you, and wear them, or on the birthdays of Marcus Garvey, people drag this stuff out. We're saying we want to make an ongoing, incessant cultural revolution. So these enterprises will also contribute to Africans being connected on a permanent basis with cultural manifestations, with African clothing and what have you. You wear it not because it's fashion, because it just happened, because that's what you do. And guess what? We're going to give it uhuru swag. You understand? And there's this whole thing of cross, what do you call it? Pollination, culturally, that happens among Africans around the world. And we learn so much from us, and this is going to be made manifest with the kind of clothing that we are able to do as well. We will take the best of traditional African clothing and artifacts and give them the modern youthful swag demanded by these times. The uhuru swag will dissuade our young people from deserting our culture for popular expressions that are usually designed by Africans under colonial labels. The African community will be won to a greater appreciation of our African national identity and revolutionary cultural expressions as exemplified by the clothing produced by this independent anti-colonial economic institution. And they're going to have the benefit of seeing the African Freedom Choir, the party Uhuru Freedom Choir, dressed in African swag, doing this, etc. That's going to contribute to what people are able to recognize as where it's at. The Bahamas is a tourist destination, and there are relatively well-established marketplaces there, but few that provide what might be called Bahamian or African products. Nassau could be an important outlet for African products coming directly from the continent if they can be acquired for an affordable price. The target for our products would be the African community in the Bahamas, as well as the thousands of tourists who come to the island looking for exotic black experiences. Learning from our colonial capitalists, we will buy from each other and sell to everyone. Learning from our colonial capitalists, we will buy from each other and sell to everyone. Our slogan will be, buy black power. This takes us beyond the petty bourgeois Afro-neocolonialist demand for African people to buy black, which might profit them but promises nothing to our people as a means of breaking out of the colonial prison we have inhabited for the last several centuries. Buy black power does not only serve to promote our movement products, but will encourage other merchants within our colony to promote and develop an anti-colonial commercial approach as well. The Office of the Deputy Chair must also examine the possibility of using the Uhuru House and our local offices in each region within the U.S. and anywhere else possible as distribution points for our food products. This is especially true of Uhuru Foods and Pies. In other words, our economic activity will expand exponentially through utilization of these regional hubs and the initiation of local distribution points. These products for distribution must include shea butter from Annual, clothing from Uzi, clothing from Zenzele Consignment, and Planet Uhuru apparel from the African People's Solidarity Committee. The Burning Spear newspaper and all our books, audio and visual products must also be distributed from these sites. The Office of the Deputy Chair will have the responsibility of providing overall leadership for all the economic activity outlined here. It must develop its own system of training and support for all the economic work and provide strategic direction leading to the creation of an independent anti-colonial international socialist economy of liberated Africa and African people. To a lot of people, this will appear to be extraordinarily ambitious and even fanciful. There's nobody else that I'm aware of. The petty bourgeoisie, it talks about commerce among Africans, but they talk about major bourgeois corporations and building imperialist and capitalist enterprises. They're not talking about tearing the borders down. They're not talking about empowering the African working class. They're not talking about an independent economic activity that is not simply generating resources, but generating resources as part of the contest against colonial domination. They're not doing that. And this is, I think, a really important piece of work that we're talking about. So we want to create independent economic activity that is not simply inspired by an aspiration of individual wealth, but that recognizes itself as part of the struggle for self-determination. The Office of the Deputy Chair can begin training programs for Africans to initiate and participate in successful economic ventures as part of the overall anti-colonial economic work. Our Buy Black Power programs will help to inspire our community from its deepest, most oppressed and exploited sectors to political consciousness of self-reliance. This, along with our community and neighborhood gardens, will begin the process of generalized self-initiated economic development on the terms of the people instead of the predatory colonial merchants, bankers, and their political minions. And anybody who was at the banquet last night, you heard this comrade brother Gary Brooks stand up. He already has a little garden right there across the street from the Uhuru House. Right over there where those buildings were that we demolished, comrade brother Charles. And now we've torn those down. We're making a major community garden there. And this brother stood up at the banquet and he said, all right, look out. So come this fall, this is what we're going to be planting. Be ready for it. We're going to put some trees down. So we're going to put some plum trees, some pear trees, some apple trees, and all this other stuff. And I'm going to show you how to do it. I want, as many people who want to participate in this project. This is on West Florissant. This is in North St. Louis that we're talking about. This is on this main thoroughfare that they've designated as a food desert. This is where there is no meaningful economic activity that happens at all. This is what the party is doing there, and Africans in this community are uniting with this project and participating on when and how they can. So I want to call on people to really read this. I think I might have about 2 or 3 minutes left. I want to just say something on page 125. And this is under the subhead, NPDOM must open local offices in the African colony. In addition to the regional party offices, NPDOM must also open up local storefront offices in every region in order to deepen its relationship with the African working class. We're talking about every community, we say every region, every community. So in addition to the Uhuru House here, there must be a local NPDOM office there, right there among the masses of the people, every community. That's the objective. Like our regional party offices, NPDOM offices should function as outlets for products from the economic enterprises of our party and movement until the local NPDOM branches are capable of opening standalone neighborhood storefronts deep in the working class communities within the African colonies. The colonial state knows more or less where we are located. Now the masses, upon whom our security and revolutionary success depend, need to be able to find us also. The existence of local community offices becomes material, practical evidence of our work. The offices become community meeting places for discussing and organizing around the critical questions assaulting our people daily, especially the working class. The burning spear and other party and movement materials can also be acquired at our office. Political posters in our office contribute to mass political education by showing our unity with the oppressed peoples of the world and exhibiting our revolutionary credentials. Running and raising the resources to operate local offices and providing community political education will contribute to the ideological, organizational, and political development of party cadre. No freeloaders. Open the damn office. How am I gonna pay for it? Have a meeting and decide, and then go to work to make it happen. No freeloaders. Everybody goes to work to make this happen. That's what cadre is. That's what the advanced detachment is. That's what the Vanguard is. And we do this in critical communities where we are located, where most of the oppression is concentrated, where the Mike Browns are being killed in our communities. This is where we are going to be located. Our local offices will be the centers of organized resistance. They will be the institutions within which the African working class will organize the implementation of the community gardens and for collective efforts to feed our colonized communities. They will be the location for the work to build the African People's Free Child Care Collectives, designed to initiate the socialist-inspired struggle for political, economic, and social liberation of working class African women, too many of whom are immobilized by the sole responsibility of raising our children. The offices will become the centers for the development of black community control of the police and schools, centered in the leadership of the African working class. The work within our communities and from the local imperialism and other mass movement offices will function practically as politically directed components of the great cultural revolution that will facilitate our African internationalist global revolution. The offices will also function as fortresses against gentrification. The very presence of conscious anti-colonial Africans who are organized and in constant motion will function to dissuade the North American interlopers from invading our community. In fact, it was the rise of the revolutionary anti-colonial resistance in the 1960s that resulted in the so-called white flight that emptied the inner cities of colonizers at that time. It has only been since the quiet that has descended with the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 60s that there has been a resurgence of white so-called investors, many of whom are ordinary white colonizers, mining for cheap property at the expense of the collective wealth, potential political power, and social cohesion of our colonized community. So there's much else that has to be said. Again, I really implore everyone to go through the political report, and I hope that the discussion that we've had up to now and have during this process will make it easier for people to jump in, and hopefully somebody might even become excited about what we've heard and want to go ahead and take this on. So with that, comrades, we are going to go ahead and move this agenda, and I just can't overstate the significance of this 7th Congress of our party and what I think that it foretells for the future of the liberation struggle. What we have done and what we are doing now is taking on different tendencies that we've seen in the African liberation movement. On the one hand, we've seen people who say, like the original Nation of Islam, do for self and build these economic things. On the other hand, almost as the opposition, opposite of that, is like the Black Panther Party and the revolutionary sector. Build a revolution and make that happen. And somehow there's been this separation between the economic and the political. And what we are doing is introducing revolutionary polity into the whole economic question. Saying, you understand? That's what the African People's Socialist Party is about. And we are establishing a true blueprint for the movement and struggle of our people moving forward. Is related to the Africa.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman, for leading us through this session and the reading the reports to deepen the understanding, the significance of these historical reports to everyone who's listening. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take questions. So it's going to be time to discuss. And I understand we already have 3 questions ready, and I'm not sure.
This is a very deep plot.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Should I take it off mute now, right? Okay. Okay.
Yes, we will.
Uhuru.
Okay, we are ready? So we're going to take the first question. If you come to the mic and say who you are and ask your question.
Uhuru, Chairman. My name is Revisai. I'm from Houston, Texas. And my question is, once we establish like the local offices and the storefronts and like help transform these businesses in the community to anti-colonial institutions, how do they then exercise political power in the community?
Well, we're not talking about a storefront that's separate from the political component. The organizers who are doing the storefronts are also the organizers for political power in the communities, and the storefronts and economic activity become a reflection of the political power of the African working class. It is our power that we are constructing when we do these storefronts that we put in our community, one. The other thing that we're doing is that beyond the work of our party, whether it is directly through the African People's Socialist Party or the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement, we create an attitude among other Africans who may not be in the party, who may just be African merchants. We inspire others to join in on this anti-colonial struggle, because as quiet as it's kept, even sectors of African petty bourgeoisie who are just trying to make some money find all kinds of problems doing that, because white power messes with them all the time. They don't have enough money to bond. If they want to do construction, they don't have money for bonds and all this other kind of stuff that happens. So we create a momentum among the African working class, and we create an attitude about self-reliance, self-determination, and we buy black power as opposed to just trying to do this yourself. And the community will unite with Africans who are working for the community more than they will unite with an African who's just trying to fatten his own pocket. You know what I'm saying? I hope that was okay.
So what you're saying is that we do the political work in the process of building the
We're doing
institutions.
political work. In fact, this becomes a critical part of the political work that we're doing. Opening up these storefronts in our communities become a part of the political work that we are doing. That becomes a part of the political work. Uhuru.
So we're going to get... So we have 3 more questions, so please come to the mic and speak loud so people can hear your question, say who you are.
Uhuru, Chairman, this is Christine. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri.
Uhuru, this is Christine.
And my question is, there are those in our community who believe that continuing the Black Revolution of the 60s is unnecessary, and that we have, that we should be working within the capitalist system to achieve whatever degree of success. How will we explain the necessity and urgency to carry out our revolution to its successful conclusion?
Well, one of the things that we do, Carmen, Sister Christine, is even as the reason there are people who tell us that is because they run into some evidence that we are trying to complete the Black Revolution of the 60s, but they are not the only people who hear us. There are masses of other people who do hear us, and they hear us in our communities where we are doing this work, and people want revolution. I'm telling you, people do not want Bernie Sanders, people do not want Donald Trump, people want revolutionary values. That's just the real deal. And sometimes people won't listen to us because
So what I'm saying is that some people would not be won. When the people who can be won, the people who can be won will change the ground under the feet of those who are reluctant to come forward, and they will find themselves having to come forward to keep up with the tide of history. Yeah.
Sister Christine, can you come back momentarily? Comment Louise before the person person is called. Do you remember the names that we were talking about?
Shapuva is one.
Say it again.
Shapuva.
Shapuva.
Shapuva, but the other name I don't remember. I have to check
Okay, that's all right. I'll talk to you later. All right. Good. How's that? We're going to, that's just trying to turn that colonial name loose. And before this Congress is over, before she leaves, she's going to be a new person. Yeah, we're going to issue her a rebirth certificate. Hold on.
Uhuru, Chairman. My question is pertaining to, I'm Alofa Nakimba. I'm from Hawaii, and the question I'm asking pertains more like so to Chapter 4 and the crisis of imperialism and dealing with, in terms of North Korea. So it says, the DPRK is one of the few nations like where workers have achieved state power. And there are some who like attribute it to like its own philosophy that's rooted in like Marxist-Leninist theory, which is a metaphysical theory, as they don't even like regard African people as something that can be advanced. It's something that's it's an economic category to Marxists and Leninists. That's what I believe is Juche or
Juche. It's Juche.
Juche.
Yeah.
That philosophy.
He's talking about the philosophy of the Revolutionary Party, or the party that was founded by Kim Il-sung, who is considered by many as the father of the Korean nation, who led the revolutionary struggle in Korea. A real revolutionary. Believe me, he was not some figurehead. He was a real revolutionary leader who led that movement. He came forward with a philosophy called Il-Juche. And the question being raised is, I referenced the party, Democrat of the so-called North Korea, as being an example of revolutionary working class coming to power, and this was something that was opposed by the imperialists. And I think what you're suggesting is it was based on Marxism, Leninism, therefore it's problematic. Is that what your suggestion is? You know, what is not problematic, the reason it's problematic is not what they understood, because the imperialists do not understand economics either. They really don't. You know how, just leading to what was the 2007, 2008 so-called economic crisis, and how they still haven't been able to explain how it happened or anything like that. And the reason they can't explain how it happened is because it requires a deep and profound self-criticism that is incapable of making, because the whole economic foundation of capitalism is slavery and colonialism. So to say that this happened because the slaves are rising up and created certain kinds of crisis, they can't do that. But the thing is that, and the Marxists didn't quite get that either, and that was one of the difficulties that we've talked about in terms of Marxism, because the Marxists ultimately came to conclusions that socialist revolution comes as a consequence of a certain development of the contradictions inside the societies, and they came forward with this concept of human development that went from what they call slavery went from what they call primitive, I like this, primitive communism through slavery, through feudalism, and then capitalism. But to get from feudalism to capitalism, it got tricky. So so Marx came up with this concept of the primitive accumulation of capital, because they got to explain where the hell did the capital come from? Where did the hell did the capital come from to start the capitalist production? And he decided that the capital came from what he called primitive accumulation. So he explains the history of the oppressed peoples around the world as something that functioned for the development of Europe. Do you understand what I just said? So slavery, we become footnotes in history. Slavery, even the war by England on China, what did they call it? Say it again? Well, anyway, where they forced, China You know, the Opium War, they forced China to do opium. You know, all of this, and although Marx didn't say it explicitly, you can't talk about a primitive accumulation of capital that does not include the entire territories of the Americas. How could there be capitalism here if there were no dead indigenous peoples? If that didn't happen, you wouldn't have capitalism here. If there were no slavery, there would be no capitalism here. But we were defined as primitive accumulation. And we were defined in a fashion that contributed to the development of Europe, to the real people. The real people was the white people, was European. They didn't say white people, they said Europe. We were the uncivilized peoples, all of us. So, but nevertheless, when this whole idea of the working people taking power as a challenge to capitalist production, every corporation in the world shuddered at this thought. And they shuddered at what seemed to have been happening. First, you had the Bolshevik Revolution, which, by the way, defied all of the Marxist assumptions about where socialism would come from. And then after the Bolshevik Revolution, now you got the Chinese Revolution, and they begin to talk about this domino effect of all these peoples now fighting for communism or socialism, and bringing the working people to power. And of course, if the slaves come to power, what happens to the slave master, right? And so this becomes the fundamental threat. So they were frightened by this. The other thing I want to say about Korea is the Juche, the philosophy of Kim Il-sung. Also, it can loosely be translated as sort of like anti-flunkyism. And they were not going to be anybody's flunky. They were not going to be the flunkies of Russia, China, or anybody else. That was deeply ingrained in Korea, in what they call North Korea. And that's one of the reasons that I think many of the suspicion, many of the things that they thinking they're going to do in Korea, it seems to me to misunderstand the Korean revolution, Korean movement. So the problem with Korea, the problem with Cuba, the problem with Vietnam, look at Vietnam right now, the most magnificent revolution humanity has ever seen. A handful of people that started off with rocks and sticks, defeated first the French, defeated the Americans, crushed them, wiped them out, etc. In the socialist revolution. That's what they were fighting for. But the material conditions for the rise of socialism didn't exist. Marx was wrong. He was wrong, that's all I'm saying. But it scared the French to death. The French so much that they sent everything they had. It frightened Americans to death. I was looking at something that was reported in the news today, that the Americans were even contemplating using atomic weapons against Vietnam. They also publicly talked about doing it against the people in Korea. So that meant they were scared to death. Regardless of anything else, they thought the working people were coming to power. And that was a threat to them, right? Serious threat to them. Working people are coming to power. They need to be nuking up again. Uhuru. So I hope that was helpful. Uhuru, yeah. Joshua.
That short
Technicians just like to do that because it makes them look important. Makes them look necessary.
Uhuru, Chairman. My name is Jalsan. I'm from San Diego, California.
Uhuru, San Diego.
San Diego. I see so many cats from San Diego in here. It makes me really, really proud. Okay, my questions, I'm just going to ask because it's kind of a lot. First of all, I want to thank you and appreciate you. When you opened up today, you began speaking about the struggle that the ruling class is having with Kavanaugh and Ford. And when the ruling class starts struggling with each other, what they've done in this struggle is that they've, tried to polarize it between men and women. So a lot of petty bourgeois Africans, a lot of Africans are, getting into this discussion on, men, that African men are the problem along with white men. And I'm using that as an example because we've been talking about dual and contending power, and the fact that economics and the politics and economics are one. And I'm wondering because the way the petty black business first, right? Black business, buying black versus buying black power, right? So you have all these, African people who have all these different businesses, whether they sell dashikis or ice cream or whatever it is. What my question is there a way to include black business, buying black opposed to buying black power, into the process of dual and contending power? And then it made me think when you started talking about the impedum offices, how does that all work together with the petty boo that's going to continue to attack?
Yeah, that's a really important question because there is a way, and I think before this Congress is over, I think that part of what the report from Comrade Deputy Chair is going to bring us includes some response to that. Because most of the small businesses in the African community, they usually don't have money, they don't have capital, and they are relatively inept. They really don't even know how to do business effectively. And even when we started doing much of the economic work that we do, we participated in an association that had been created by some white people who do certain kinds of business stuff, where they have training sessions, annually, in different places around the country, and people can pay to participate and can pick up certain skills and even go to certain enterprises where you can see it happening on the ground and you can ask questions from them as well as from the other experts who come. Well, we've been doing this stuff for 25, 30 years, and we have experts. And we are going to initiate an association of our own called the NIBA, African Independence Business Association, so that Africans who are in business, who want to go in business, can learn how to do it, can come, and we will do the same thing for obviously not as much resources as those who trained us did. And the objective is to win them to a collective participation because, like I said, the African businesses, these Africans who are in business, first of all, they ain't got nothing. They mostly don't have resources, they don't have expertise, they don't know how to do anything, etc. They need the community. And what we want to do is change their relationship to the community and to their own capacity. There used to be a time in communities around this country, African communities, where we had patriotic Africans. That's when Africans had businesses in our own communities where they predominated. Because it used to be white folks were too good to take money from black people, really would. And that's why the Jews would do that nigger kind of work. They would come into the community and work their way up through coming to our coast. Ordinary white people wouldn't dare to lower themselves to that. And so what we are saying is that we can bring these Africans into a much more effective ability and help them to have a greater relationship to our community. We can create the patriotic African business person who can be against colonialism, can be against white power, white people taking everything. That's why much of the anti-Jewish sentiment came among certain black nationalist organizations in our community because they were competing with those Jews who had the capital, who could come into our communities and set up their businesses, and here we are, we can't even set up business in our own community. So that was a part of what's happening. So I'm saying that what we do concretely, setting up these examples can shift the attitude and mindset of Africans generally. What we do in terms of providing the training for people in our own movement and anybody else who wants to learn how to do it, including Africans who are trying to do their little businesses, can shift their consciousness and turn them into anti-colonial forces, even if they don't become socialists, even if they don't become revolutionaries, they can become patriotic in the sense of, if only because they want to protect their own market. They want to protect their own market. They don't want the white man in here because that's my market. And that can put them on an anti-colonial trajectory, but not just on the anti-colonial trajectory. This is a project under the leadership of African working class. So that's what we're talking about being able to do. Uhuru.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru Roberto.
Uhuru, comrades. My name is Robert. I'm from Orlando, Florida. And I know that you had said that we're a Leninist type party in the sense that we're the Vanguard. And I'm seeing a lot of people online who proclaim themselves to be revolutionaries and have a Marxist-Leninist theory. And I wanted you to deepen how African internationalism, or what questions African internationalism answers that Marxist-Leninism is incapable of answering. Uhuru.
For one thing, we don't think we're the uncivilized people. But other than that, beyond that, the question again is recognizing that the foundation of capitalism, Marx said it, and Lenin was discovering certain things about that too. In fact, you know, there were actual members of Lenin's party who refused to try to take power in 1917 because the assumption was they had to first go through capitalism before they could have socialism. There were members of Lenin's party who actually called the police to snitch that the actual seizure of power was going to happen on a certain date. In the Central Committee, they did that. They put it in the newspaper, say, hey, they're going to do the uprising on Thursday. I mean, this literally happened, right? Because they didn't believe that, they believed that you had to go first to capitalism, and Lenin violated everything that Marx had told them about what it took to make, you know, revolution. So, and people have forgotten that. And in fact, Lenin had to come up with a concept to explain why Russia, after all this, and Lenin was an astute, I want to say Marxist, but he was more than that because most of the Marxists had big problems with Lenin, but he was pretty astute, and he knew Marx in and out, up and down. And so now he is put in a situation, in fact, he had said that the Russian Revolution, the Soviet Revolution cannot last unless revolution begins to happen throughout Europe, particularly in the industrially developed Europe, Germany and other places. He said it. But Lenin was a practical revolutionary. That's what I love about Lenin too, you know, because I understand he was making a speech at some juncture before the revolution, and somebody said that, you said such and such a thing that contradicts what you're saying now. He said, let me see that. And he took it, looked at it, tore it up, and threw it away. and so Lenin said, we're going to take this power. You understand? We're going to take the power. And he came up with an explanation for it, that he said, well, the reason it happened first in Russia, because Russia was the weak link in the capitalist system. Now, there ain't never been no Marxist weak link, you understand? But Lenin intended to keep power, and then he even came up with a new economic policy that was called NEP, that was really almost like state capitalism that was developed in the Soviet Union. So, I mean, that's fundamental. What I'm saying is that we say that Marx was right when he said, we quote him, I think, relatively extensively in the Political Report, that when he said that wage slavery in Europe, and that's an interesting concept, wage slavery, right? In Europe, required as a pedestal slavery pure and simple in the New World. The statement is that capitalism rests upon a pedestal of slavery. And you will find other places where Marx made similar references. I think that's in part 8, I think, something like that, of Capital. And we say he was right, and it was illogical what he did. In a sense, it was a non sequitur. To say that wage slavery requires as a pedestal slavery pure and simple, then if he's saying that capitalism rests upon this pedestal, then the next logical thing to say, if you want to get rid of capitalism, is to do what? Kick the pedestal out from under it, destroy slavery, and there were places where he actually explicitly said it. Get rid of slavery and you will destroy commerce, capitalist commerce. He should have stuck to that, but he couldn't. And so it's illogical for him to say, therefore, wage slavery rests on a pedestal of slavery pure and simple. Wage slavery in Europe rests on a pedestal of slavery pure and simple in the New World. It's illogical to say, therefore, we have to struggle for the people engaged in wage slavery in Europe to take power from their ruling class. You kick the pedestal out from under, you got what you're looking for, and that's what we're looking at the world today. For the first time in history, the actual material conditions for the rise of socialism is upon us because the oppressed peoples of the world, the slaves of the world, the colonized peoples of the world represent the most progressive movement in history, and we want to lead that charge to overturn the social system and bring about the communism that Marx wanted and Lenin wanted and Mao wanted and Ho Chi Minh wanted and all the revolutionary peoples of the world wanted. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman.
Uhuru.
Uhuru, come right.
Uhuru, Chairman. Really want to appreciate you for that question and answer, period, and really want to thank all of the comrades for your great so much. Thank you.
No, you must stay there and listen to me. Want me to just take it out? I'm good. Okay. Uhuru, brothers and sisters. I'm gonna talk real fast because I know we're heading toward lunch. And also, I want to respect the 5 or 10 minutes that I have, so I'm gonna be moving very, very fast. So just bear with me. First, I want to say this. This is a very special, special organization to me. I am glad that I could say that I've been to the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, that I've been to the Uhuru House here in St. Louis when there was dust all over the place. I've been to the furniture store in Philadelphia when we had a program there. I've been a part of that. And I just wanted to say to you, you are special to me because today is my 68th birthday. Today is my 68th birthday. And I said to my wife in Operation Power, I could not spend a better day for my birthday than to be here for the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Movement. So y'all better be nice to me because I got to go back to my wife and told her I came here for you instead of staying home with her. Now you know you're special. but she's a special lady. I also give you greetings from Inez Barron, my African queen, whom I love. And November 13th, we will have been married for 36 years. So I just want to celebrate that too. With that, I want to say very, very, very quickly that in New York, we have a different kind of challenge than you. And the reason why I come here often is because we have to make that connection between political empowerment and economic self-determination and self-reliancy. In New York, it's very different. When we look at New York City, particularly in my East New York, there's about 70% African, about 20% Latino, and 10% other. They split up. All of the local political power in East New York is in the hands of neo-black political puppets of the Democratic Party. They control all of the local politics. We own nothing in East New York. That's what makes it a colony of a parasitic capitalist system. We don't own the land. We don't own the businesses. We don't control the police. We don't control anything that comes out of Brookdale Hospital. A white man controls that. We don't control the education system. We certainly don't control the means of production. That makes us a colony of a parasitic capitalist system. So we said the first stage of our struggle, and we have an organization called Operation Power. Power stands for people organizing and working for empowerment and respect. Operation Power. As a matter of fact, make me feel at home. This is how we open up. When I say operation, you say power. Operation. Power. Operation. Power. That's how we start our meeting, so I feel at home now. What we decided to do, step one, is to take out the black puppets of the Democratic Party. Because if we live in a colony of capitalism, let's get the people closest to us. And as the chairman said, that's the police, and then that's the puppets, the black puppets. So we use the Democratic primary as a strategy to take those positions and push our agenda of socialism, our agenda of black power, whether they liked it or not. The chairman always said we can't leave any area uncontested. No area should be left uncontested. So our contestant, our confrontation is in the political arena, electorally in a narrow sense, electoral arena taken on the black political puppets. In East New York and in every black community in New York, they control everything. The community board, they have the district leaders, the male and female. They control the 300 election day workers. They hire the election day workers, and our grassroots people, struggling African working class people, they want to make $300 for the primary and $300 for the general election. That's how the Democratic Party has their clubs in our district, because they tell our people, we'll give you 300 jobs, but you have to join the Democratic Party. And you have, that's illegal, by the way, because the Democratic Party is not paying them. The Board of Elections is paying them, and that's out of the public's money. So they tell them they have to join their party, and they have to take out petitions for their party candidates. So if you try to run against them, they have a battery of lawyers, they have a bunch of preachers, they have a bunch of elected officials, and you're out there just with the masses. Well, I want to tell you all, we wiped that club out in East New York. We wiped it out in East New York. We didn't have a whole lot of money. If you ever look up our public fundraising, most of it comes out of me and Inez's pocket. We got some poor, struggling folks. So we do the bare minimum. I tell them if we can just do 30, 40, 50,000, we got this. And we just do it, and we don't have no corporate money. We never get supported by elected officials. The unions didn't come until we won. When we won, they said, oh, Barron, he's all right, you know. Then I got union endorsement, but for the most part, we beat them on the ground. We went to the block association presidents. We went to the tenant association presidents. The good thing about being in a condensed community like that, and then the projects, they call them public housing. I grew up in the projects. In the projects is that you got 2,000 to 3,000 people right there. So if you want to get down, we go door to door. As we said, door to door wins the war. We go door to door, and the brothers and sisters in the projects are right there. So if you get one building, you got 100 people, because it's 14 stories high. So we outdid the Democratic Party, who was giving little program stuff to all of the block association presidents. They were giving jobs to the people in our community on election day. They made sure that they funded their programs and stuff. So when I came to run, they said, Brother Barron, we love you, but you know, they got me, look what they did. They funded my program. They gave me this. I said, that's not leadership, that's a requirement. They have to give you that, because that's where the money has to go. We were able to convince district leaders, we were able to convince them, and we won. We won in 2001 by 269 votes. We won the city council seat. After that, one of the elected officials in the state assembly was corrupt, went to jail. That seat became available, and my wife won that one. So we had the city council and we had the state assembly. Then we not really Democrats at all. We use it as a strategy. Let me just say this real quick. The electoral process is not a panacea. We're not going to vote our way to victory. That's not going to happen. We're not going to vote our way to revolution. But we can get radicals and revolutionaries in there to mess their system up, to confront them, to make them, put them on edge. You know, I've confronted the governor. He tried to make his State of the State address. That's his main address. I jumped out of my seat and jumped all in his face. So every place on TV, they had to show me confronting him in his State of the State. The mayor tried to come into East New York, and he tried to take credit for a housing development that I brought in to East New York. I snatched the mic from him in front of the whole city. We confront. That's confrontational politics. So as I stand before you today, I want to show you two quick clips, and then I'm finished. I want to say to you that we are the district leaders, the male and female district leaders that hire all of those 300 workers. My wife and I won those 2 seats this time around too. So they don't even have that. We're going to hire all of the brothers and sisters now. The Democratic Party Club doesn't have their district leaders. Then there's a judicial delegate. We have all of those. There's the community board that has, you know, chairperson, district manager. All of those are from Operation Power. We have the judicial, the judge, the district judge for our district comes out of Operation Power. So we took all of those local seats, but then you got to make sure that the people that you're putting in them seats don't forget that you're supposed to be a revolutionary. This is the most challenging part. When you engage the system like we are in the belly of the beast. It's black radical politics, revolutionary politics in the belly of the beast. It's easier outside talking stuff, but when you get in there and you got to vote on a budget, when you get in there and you got to vote on legislation, you come back to your community and they want you to bring jobs. But if you mess around inside, they're going to isolate you and you're not getting nothing for your area. Will you be revolutionary then? Will you maintain that revolutionary fervor then? Well, I did. I told my people in my community, I said, listen, I'm going to be in there. I'm going to make it so uncomfortable for them not to give you stuff that we're going to get something. So I got in their face and they said, hey, give them the $2 million for his park. Just give it to him. Just give it to him. We have 3 parks renovated for $17.5 million. 3 parks. 3 parks. We have a group called Man Up, Inc. This was a brother, Andre Mitchell. He was close to me. We were working in the streets trying to deal with our brothers and sisters in those street organizations and ones that were coming out of jail and all of that. I had to give him $200 out of my pocket just to do a little program at the end of the year. Well, now, since being in this, he has a $3.5 million budget, hired 55 brothers and sisters that came out of the joint to work in our community to stop crime, and in an area of about 300 square feet, whatever, not one single person was killed in over 365 days, not one. Because they patrol that area, and they know the brothers because they are the brothers. They just came out. These are the things that we've accomplished. So I just wanted to come and share that very quickly with you. And the reason why I come here often, besides my love for the chair and the deputy chair, is that we got to get this economic thing together. Because we have to match our political empowerment with economic self-determination. And we're looking at community land trusts, where we can own the land. We're looking at land banks and worker cooperatives. These are the areas that we're going in next. New York City is not like St. Louis. You can't come up with $1,000 and get anything. $1,000 is for the application for you to apply for something. Everything in New York, man, for a shell is $500,000. You can't get nothing near what y'all can get here, but we're gonna work something out. So I just wanted to show you a clip. That this year they tried to stop us. The whole system came down on us. They said that we were running for 3 seats with our name on the ballot 3 times. They felt for sure they would be able to win one of those seats. The election was about a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago. And when I ran in 2014 for the state assembly, my wife and I switched, by the way. I was term limited out of the city council after 12 years. She was in the state assembly for 5 years. So she ran for my seat, the state assembly, and since hers was left unoccupied, I took that one. So I'm in the state assembly, she's in the council now. But this time around it was interesting, Chairman. 6,000 votes came out the last time I ran for assembly. This time around, 14,000 people came out to vote. It increased. I think it was an anti-Trump thing. You know, they want to stop Trump. Whatever their reasons, we need to organize that. And of that 14,000 was an 8,000 increase. We got 7,500 of those 8,000 new voters that came out. That's unheard of, and that's because of the work in the community. So this was just our little celebration on the day of the election. We hire about 100 brothers and sisters from the neighborhood, give them a couple of $100 to work the campaign. And so this was the little handful of us left in the evening to celebrate our victory.
Tonight, we won the state assembly seat. Yeah! We won the female district leadership. Yeah! And we won the male leadership. Yeah! Operation You Say Operation East New York.
That's our little celebration. A little celebration. Actually, it was another like 60, 70 people outside. We make sure they got fed and everything. And now we have all of those brothers and sisters on our files. So we're going to spend the rest of the year getting them involved with Operation Power. We are a small organization, a dedicated few. You know, Malcolm says if those who know don't say the numbers, and those who say don't know. So I ain't saying no numbers. But we're just a handful. But a little handful of people got us 11,600 votes. And now we got to raise the consciousness of our people so that they can have something. Now, the other thing the chairman says, when you get in there, you know, mess them up. If you're going to get inside, I don't do anything right. If they say turn left, I turn right. If they say go up, I go down. If they say you can't sit here, I sit there. If they say you're not supposed to bring any props when you're making speeches on the floor, I bring them. You know, like one time they were talking about Flag Day. So I got up and I said, Flag Day? Oh, no. See, y'all are comfortable criticizing the Confederate flag. That's easy. What about the racism in the American flag? They said, boo, boo. I said, Mr. Chairman, quiet them down. Discipline them. Then I kept talking, and then at the end, I had the red, black, and green flag. I got on my knee and said, and this is what I think of your flag. But they don't even want you to do something simple like that. Who cares about a flag? You can't even get up there. All my people elected me, and I can't even get up there and dish your flag. So we did that. I have a piece of legislation in that says we should change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And that's a piece of legislation. I actually have some people signed on to that legislation, and I'm going to be pushing it, this year in the State Assembly of New York. I mean, Columbus, first of all, he didn't discover anything. He never stepped foot in American soil. He was a little racist, murdering colonizer on Hispaniola, where he was the governor of. You can't discover a place where people already exist. So we got to make sure that our children know the truth. I have another piece of legislation that I'm prioritizing for next session, and that's a reparations bill for New York State. New York State was the second largest slaveholding state in the country. New York City abolished slavery in 1827, and in most of our communities, the names of the streets are named after slaveholders. We have a street called Van Sicklen. That was a Dutch slaveholder. Skank. Brothers and sisters are in the community talking about, yeah, we the Skank boys. Skank boys? You a Skank's boy? He was a slaveholder. Brooklyn. It used to be called Brookellen by the Dutch, and then when the English took over, they called it Brooklyn. So if you think Brooklyn's so bad, I'm from Brooklyn, that's a Dutch and English name. Harlem is Dutch. So we got to look at those names and watch what we're calling ourselves and being so proud of. Those are two bills I'm going to highlight. And then the third thing that we worked hard on, I did something that I didn't think was possible. There's about 55 members of the Black, Latino, and Asian caucus. I put in a resolution, and I put it before them to support the freedom of Herman Bell. Herman Bell is a revolutionary brother who was down for 43 years and was with the Black Liberation Army. They actually signed on to it, all of them signed on to the resolution to support the freedom of Herman Bell, and guess what? He is free. He's out. We did the same thing for our brother Seth Hayes. Seth Hayes was also a brother in the Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army. I got them all to sign on to that. And these were brothers that were getting 2 more years, not making it past parole, and Seth Hayes is out too. We got Seth Hayes out as well. So we're going to continue that. I'll close with this. This was a meeting because I won the male leadership. They have their little meeting, and it's about 500 people, most of them white in Brooklyn, about 500 of them. And the other ones are black lackeys that don't do anything. So they didn't want me to speak. I wasn't on the agenda. So when I came in, I said, listen, I'm going to speak. How do y'all want to do this? Do you want to introduce me? Or do you want me to just, whenever I feel like it, come up there and take the mic? So this guy, see the guy with the paper? He said, well, Charles, when would you like to speak? I said, right after you adopt the rules, I just want to say my piece. Now, I know that they were fighting for some reforms inside the party. I'm not into none of that, but I know that their reformist was there that was against the machine guys. So I said, let me manipulate so that they will cheer me on, and then I can get my stuff in on, racism and monopoly capitalism. I'll get that in toward the end. So I just want to let you see this part where some of the the battles that you have inside just to mess their thing up, because nothing in there matters at all. But there's one guy, the county boss, Frank Sedio. Do you believe they have a meeting like this, 500 of us, there's 2,000 county committee members, only 500 show up. He gets 550 proxy votes in his pocket. He has more votes in his pocket than we have people sitting at the meeting. And I said, y'all gonna let that go down? Watch how they react.
That I tried very hard to reform the Southern institutions in the South. A little change here, a little change there. But now I think differently. I think we need to radically reorganize the entire society, King said, and we should promote revolutionary values. Try to reform something that needs to be radically changed. You are complying in a game that is promoting democracy that doesn't exist. How can we sit here today with 500 and some odd of you sitting here, and Frank Sedio is sitting with more proxies than there are people here? Some of you gentrified reformers. We have to make some radical, authentic changes. Come on, brother. Not some cosmetic changes. But to bring satisfaction to some reformers that are not about radical change. I suggest this. What's going to happen today? What's going to happen today? A black and Latino district. Frank Sedio has 5,900 weighted votes, whatever the hell that means. And he's going to select a white judge for a black district because he has the weighted votes more than everybody else in that district. One man is going to select. Is going to select a white judge. And then they're going to tell you they're going to recess. They're going to go behind these curtains in private. And they're going to vote for a county-wide judge. And as they vote for this county-wide judge, we have blacks fighting it out. Frank Sedio sitting back, manipulating the whole process. David Pepper, a white judge, they're trying to get him in even in that position. Watch how it works. What you should demand tonight, don't make no decisions in private. Make it right here on the stage. You will see Councilmember Barron and myself, we're not participating in this sham of a democracy. Because Frank Sedio has complete control. Judges have to kiss his ring in order to get a judgeship. That day must end, and for Inez and I, it ends tonight. This is a sham. Finally, for all the judges that are going forward, particularly the black judges, for all the judges that are going forward, you need to read this book, Black Robes, White Justice by Judge Bruce Wright. Judge Bruce Wright was So you judges, don't just send us your resume because you want to climb up the ladder from criminal to civil to surrogate to the highest court in the land. If you want supreme, then you need to speak out. Speak out against the injustices and do that as a judge in the limitations that you have. We don't want judges just telling us that they want to climb up the ladder and give you your resume. I know there's a code of ethics and you can't do too much politically, but you can speak out against injustice. And if you don't deserve a judgeship. We need judges that talk about the racism and capitalist system that exploits us. We need judges, we need lawyers, and we need politicians that speak out against a racist, parasitic, capitalist system that exploits.
Needless to say, they had a fit, you know. And you see, it's one thing for us to say it out here to each other. It's another thing to say it when you get inside. So whoever we get inside, if that's going to be the strategy, they got to do that too. They got to maintain. I don't want to be in there. We got in there for two major reasons. One, to raise the issues, the contradictions of a racist, parasitic, capitalist system. Two, to get some material benefits for our people. That's our money. We ain't begging you for nothing. That's our money. And we got to extract as much from it as possible. I want to close talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right? The sister, the Democratic Socialist in Brooklyn and the Bronx and Queens. Let me tell you what they did. The most powerful man in Queens was the person she beat. So they made that a big, deal, and it was. It was a grassroots campaign. She beat one of the most powerful elected officials, Joe Crowley in Queens. But the reason why they have to put democratic in front of socialism is because they're not really socialist. So you don't need no adjective, if you were, they don't talk about the people controlling the means of production. They don't even talk about nationalizing industries. Bernie and her don't talk about dismantling the capitalist system and replace it with a socialist system. You know what they talk about? Medicare for all under capitalism. What they talk about is tax the rich under capitalism. What they'll talk about is regulate Wall Street. We want to get rid of Wall Street. We don't want to regulate Wall Street. Regulate Wall Street. So if they come before you and say, tax the rich, yeah, all right. Regulate Wall Street, yeah. Free health care, free education. What about getting rid of capitalism? No, we're working on that, And they'll tell you they want to move the Democratic Party to the left. We want to move the Democratic Party out, period. Not moving them to the left. So that's our ventures. We do the Democratic primary. We have no loyalty to the Democratic Party. We don't go to their meetings unless we do that. They don't raise no money for us. We raise our own money. They don't get no petitions for us to get on the ballot. They don't try to get out the vote for us. We do all of that with African, working class, grassroots people in the heart of East New York. And we're going to continue till we liberate East New York. It will no longer be a colony, and we're looking for your direction for the economic part, and we'll keep handling our political thing. Uhuru, brothers and sisters. When I say operation, you say operation. Straight ahead.
Uhuru, Brother Charles, you were not with us last night. at the banquet, we would have presented this to you last night. Keep reminding people of that. I'm sorry, but we understand. But what we did want to do was to recognize you today by providing you from the office of Chairman Amalia Shatella, the African People's Socialist Party, to Charles Barron, the Community Service Award, just to let you know how much we appreciate the work that you do for your support of the Uhuru movement. The award reads, for your outstanding contribution to the African community in the struggle for self-determination. To Brother Charles Barron. And one more thing, it's your birthday. And we wanted to say happy birthday as a token, again, of our love and appreciation. We have a little gift basket here for you. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Uhuru.
I get a lot of awards. I have a whole bunch of plaques. To be honest with you, most of them are in my drawers. But this one is special. And this one I'm going to put up in my office for everybody to see. Uhuru.
I just want to say that one of the reasons we love to have Comrade Charles Barron around is because he functions as garlic or cross does like to vampires. He does that to black elected officials. So to have him around, though, is really, and he's been to actual schools, electoral schools that we've done. I think one in St. Louis as well. It's really important because, you know, every thief thinks everybody steals, right? And when this comrade has come and these black elected officials, they are there as well, they sidle up to him on almost every occasion to start talking about tricks of the trade. And they're always confounded when they hear from this brother who talks about you got to serve the people, and this stuff you're talking about just for yourself doesn't mean anything. For him to come here and have this discussion with us and then to give concrete evidence that this discussion goes beyond us, that he's within the circles of the bourgeoisie doing the same thing, it makes it more difficult for these petty bourgeois sellout politicians to come before the people who've heard this example and do the kinds of things that we do. So that's one of the reasons we really appreciate Comrade Charles Barron. Uhuru. Plus, he remembers Cut 'em Loose Bruce. You should make him tell you about, that's Bruce Wright, the judge that he was talking about. He won the enmity of the bourgeoisie, and the media began, what was the case that he would intervene?
A police officer has sliced, a guy has sliced a police officer's face.
Yeah.
And he cut him loose.
He turned him loose, and the bourgeois media started referring to him as Cut 'em Loose Bruce. Right. And this was a judge, and he reminds me of the judge in Detroit when the Republic of New Africa had that shootout in Aretha Franklin's father's church with the police and shot, I don't remember if they killed any of those agents who came in there, but by the time they got to the jail, the Republic of New Africa, this brother who was a judge met them to the jail and turned them all loose on their own recognizance. So this is what our revolutionary activity among the masses of the people will influence and inform and force people who might otherwise want to do sellout stuff to do what needs to be done for the masses. Uhuru.
Uhuru. I want to thank our brother Charles Barron one more time for that great presentation. And his stance, I think, made me really feel like this chant was appropriate. Y'all know this one? No compromise. No compromise. No compromise. No compromise. That has to be our stance. No compromise, no surrender. Thank you for that. So now we're going to be going into lunch. I know y'all are hungry. But before we do that, I want to just make a couple of announcements. First of all, we're going to take a Congress photograph that we want everybody to be a part of before we go into lunch. So after I'm done with the announcements, then I would like for everybody to come make your way to the stage. We're going to take a picture, and then we're going to line up for lunch. So we've got a couple announcements, and then we're going to go ahead and take that picture. We want to please remind everybody to visit the vendors' tables during lunch break. We want you to go to the Burning Spear table and get your copy of the latest Burning Spear newspaper. You can also pick up bundles of the Spear to sell in your area. So make sure you get your Burning Spear newspapers during lunch. You can pre-order your copy of the published book of the Chairman's Political Report to the 7th Congress, which will be available in February 2019. It's not too late to sign up for the Marcus Garvey Legacy Cruise at the Chairman's table. The cruise sails December the 9th through the 16th from Miami, going through the Caribbean. So make sure if you have any interest or if you want more information about that cruise that you check out the Chairman's table, sign up today for the Marcus Garvey Legacy Cruise. It's not too late. Okay, we want to also encourage people to purchase your Congress t-shirt. So while we're at lunch and you're checking out all the vending tables, make sure you go out into the registration area and purchase your Congress t-shirt. So now we're going to have Comrade Tachara give a very brief announcement, and then we're going to get ready for our, okay, and then Comrade. Is that what you're doing? Okay, so we're going to have a couple more announcements. We want to invite people to join us for the Black is Back annual March on Washington, which is going to be November the 6th, the 3rd, November the 3rd and 4th. So for more information, please check out the Chairman's table. We want everybody to join us in Washington, D.C., November the 3rd and the 4th.
What I want to do now, I want to call up current leadership of the
we want to ask the people serving lunch not to give all the food away. All right, thank you.
Quick question about lunch. If you have purchased a ticket for the week and you have not gotten your lunch ticket, go see registration ASAP, because we recognize that there were some people who came in who didn't get their lunch ticket. And also, we have extra. So if you feel like you want to eat now, you can go ahead to the registration and pay for $10 for your lunch today. And I think that was another one. Oh, if you had purchased your t-shirts ahead of time, pre-ordered them, please see registration, because I realize that some of you have not received your t-shirts from that. Okay, Uhuru.
Uhuru. So now before we head out to lunch, everybody should please make your way to the stage so that we can prepare for our Congress photo. And then right after the photo, line up at the ASI table for lunch. Uhuru.
What I want to do now, I want to call up current leadership of the International African Revolution, the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, Omala Yeshitela.
It was during one of my frequent prison stints that it became clear to me that the era of protest politics was over, that our people had to really fight for power, and that meant we had to have a political party, the most effective vehicle for capturing and wielding political power. It became clear that black power had to be translated as our own black state power.
Of Chairman Omali Yeshitela for his vision, brilliant leadership, and tenacious fight for the liberation of African people and oppressed people worldwide. And saluting Deputy Chair Ona Zane Yeshitela for implementing the Chairman's vision and uniting the political and economic as one in the struggle for dual and contending power. In 1968, while on a 5-year prison sentence for tearing down a colonialist mural that hung in St. Petersburg, Florida City Hall, Chairman Omali Yeshitela formed JOMO, the junta of militant organizations, and launched the Burning Spear newspaper.
Definitely not short. Come on in. Yeah, come on in. Somebody said, that's how we do, boy. Yes, David. It's like a 12-inch TikTok. Somebody spot David, please. He's spotting the right time. Okay.
It may not be our extension cord. Let's see. Excuse me. Nah. No, it's the cord's not. Yeah, the cord. Our cord. Oh, watch out. Oh, yeah, it's taped down. That's why.